All right, thank you, Dan. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City Council meeting for the City of Edina. It is a virtual meeting. We will discuss in a minute calling in to testify during our singular public hearing matter this evening. Folks can watch the meeting live on Edina TV. That's Comcast channels 813 for the high def, or channel 16. Facebook.com/EdinaMN. edinamn.gov/live meetings. As I mentioned earlier, it is Tuesday, September 15th, 2020. Before we call the meeting to order, we've got a few things that we need to deal with to comply with the governor's order with regard to work of this nature. So the governor has a Stay Safe MN order in place to ensure the safety of all residents and staff. This meeting is being held electronically to comply with that order. All members of the City Council, our staff, and our presenters are participating from their homes or their offices. And before we begin, there's a few things that we need to cover for those listening in and hoping to participate in portions of the meeting. The city's committed to continuing to receive and hear your input on matters. We've been collecting public input through our council correspondence web form, a voicemail, our engagement website, bettertogetheredina.org. And we know that it's important that all your comments be heard, and those that have been submitted have been received and read prior to the meeting. And for that, we appreciate your cooperation. Tonight, there's going to be two times when you can call in to provide comment via telephone. The first is during community comment portion of the agenda. Recall that you are allowed to speak on anything that is not on tonight's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing. And then the second opportunity for public input will be during the public hearing on a proposed alley right-of-way easement vacation at 5012 Bedford Avenue. If you want to call in either for community comment or for the Bedford Avenue matter, write down this number. It's 800-374-0221. 800-374-0221. The conference ID is 4591089, and you will be given 3 minutes to speak. City Manager Scott Neal will be timing you, and he'll let you know if you run over your allotted 3-minute mark for comment. And to make sure all residents have an opportunity to participate, we will not act on public hearing matters tonight. The public hearing matters will remain open, or that matter, singular matter, will remain open until noon on Wednesday, September 23rd. You can leave a voicemail with your feedback at 952-826-0377. That is, if you want to leave a voicemail, again, 952-826-0377, or you can submit a comment online at bettertogetheredina.org. Again, that is until noon, September 23rd, when the matter will be closed. So thanks in advance for your cooperation. As for your patience, while all of us work from home or from offices, we've got about 20 different people participating in the meeting, all using different types of technology. We're hoping, of course, that we don't have any technological issues, but if we do, we'll get them corrected as quickly as possible with our very able staff. So let's call the meeting to order. As I mentioned earlier, it is Tuesday, September 15th, 2020. And roll call, please. Clerk Allison.
Member Anderson? You don't seem to be muted, but I can't hear you, Member Anderson.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I didn't quite get that. Sorry.
Okay. Member Brindle?
Aye.
Member Fisher?
Aye.
Member Staunton?
Aye.
Mayor Hovland?
Here. The next matter on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I think mine will be the only mic turned on during this recital for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. Is there anyone who wishes to modify the agenda for any reason? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the meeting agenda as shown.
So moved.
Second.
Member Fisher moves, Member Staunton seconds. The meeting agenda, the adoption of the meeting agenda. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, with respect to the adoption of the meeting agenda.
Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Brindle,
Aye.
Member Fisher,
Aye.
Member Staunton,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The meeting agenda is adopted as shown. The next thing we're going to do is go to community comment. So remember, folks, if you're in the queue to speak, or if you want to call in, the number for community comment is 800-374-0221, 800-374-0221, and the conference ID 459-1089, 459-1089. An operator will ask for your name and street address and put you in the queue, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And Director Benarott is monitoring this public input portion of the agenda with regard to community comment and also with respect to the public hearing. Director Benarott, do we have anybody in the queue that wishes to address the council on a matter of concern to them?
Good evening, Mayor Hovland and members of the council. We do have a few people queued up to participate in community comment tonight. Our first caller is Andy Brown. Operator, will you please unmute the line of Mr. Andy Brown? Andy, once your line has been unmuted, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
Mr. Andy Brown, your line is now open.
Yes, good morning.
Mr. Brown, before you start, I owe you a phone call, and I was hoping to get to it today. My apologies for not getting to you, but I'll give you a call tomorrow. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate that. Andy Brown, 5512 Park Place in Edina. I don't mean to sound flippant, but I really am concerned, and I'd like to some consolation from the council and from the city manager regarding the safety of residents in Edina. The last 48 hours have been traumatic, to say the least. There's been a carjacking at 46th and Arden. There's been the obvious attempted murder of a doctor at Fairview Southdale Hospital. About a year ago, in that relative same neighborhood on France Avenue, a young high school girl was mowed down by a vehicle as she was waiting for her bus, in also what I would classify an attempted murder type scenario. And quite frankly, that, along with your own consultants and your own Edina Fire Department saying that there was a need for a second and third fire station to be funded, which currently it is not, makes me question whether this is the right place for me to raise my 3-year-old son. The school district, which I know that very well that you guys don't have an effect on, has gone down in quality from, in the U.S. News and World Report, from roughly about 100 when I graduated, as far as the top schools in the nation back in '94, and now it's over 800 in the ranking. So I'm very concerned about where this community is heading regarding what it's investing in. I look at that CIP and I understand a lot of people put a lot of effort into it, but it seems like we are drastically failing the blocking and tackling of safety and security for Edina residents. There was a recent Patch article that ranked us at a B-, and that was prior to the last 2 days worth of activity. So I would really like to hear from the city manager and council regarding what's the way forward here, because my family's invested a lot in this, multiple generations, and if this isn't the right place to be, then I need to move. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Our next caller this evening is Ms. Lori Groats. Operator, will you please unmute that line? Lori, once your line has been unmuted, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
Ms. Lori Groats, your line is now open.
Lori Groats, 5513 Park Place.
After much public discussion by the City Council on how to fund future street reconstruction, the Council decided on a street funding task force composed of residents and city staff to make recommendations on street funding. The City Council approved a task force in March. Manager Neal stated during a City Council meeting the street task force meetings would be open to the public. In the City Manager's Street Financing Task Force document, as posted on the city website, it states, meetings will be open to the public. Due to COVID-19, public meetings are not taking place in person, but are being broadcast live online or are being recorded with recording available to the public. The city has used WebEx, Edina Facebook, Edina TV, and Edina YouTube. I have not been able to find the meeting schedule for the street task force nor the required postings for these open meetings. They are not on Nova's agenda, the Edina Sun Current, nor on the meeting board located outside the 50th Street liquor store. I have heard these meetings have not been recorded. The task force is supposed to meet at least monthly, and they are scheduled to meet with the City Council at their work session in November. The city manager in the city's document has classified these meetings as public. They are subject to Minnesota's open meeting law. These meetings have not been publicly posted, nor have they been available digitally or via recording like other city public meetings. It appears the city is in violation of Minnesota's open meeting law, and each closed meeting constitutes a violation. The remedy: start the task force meetings over again, but this time make them public. If you think this is too time-consuming, the Housing Task Force met for over 6 months before they knew what their actual charge was from the City Council. I don't think the creation of meeting minutes alone will restore the trust of Edina residents. The funding of street reconstruction financially affects all residents, including apartment dwellers and commercial building tenants who pay property taxes in their rent. Over 50% of Edina residents have already paid for or continue to pay for their street. They will be asked to pay again. Where is the street task force meeting schedule? Do recordings of task force meetings exist? And if so, where can I access them? Will you hold these meetings again this time as open meetings? Why were these meetings not open to the public as stated? Who made the decision to close them? Given the amount of City Council and public discussion on this hot topic, it would be hard to justify this as an oversight. Given the staff's compensation, it appears the work has been performed in a less than professional manner. Very disappointing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Groats. Others in the queue, Director Benarott?
We do have more callers on the line, but no one has yet indicated a desire to speak. For those who are on the call, if you would like to speak, please press *1 on your telephone keypad to get in the queue. Again, that's *1, not #1. #1 will actually take you out of the queue. With that, we do have another speaker. Operator, will you please unmute the line of Ms. Heather Beal? Heather, once your line has been unmuted, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
Ms. Heather Beal, your line is now open.
Hello, this is Heather Beal. I live at 4236 Crocker Avenue, and I've lived there for 28 years. And
Heather, would you hold on just a moment here? We've got some background noise.
Yeah, I'm trying to turn off the...
Director Benarott.
I suspect that
we're getting a repeat here on the recording. Director Benarott, you're coming through twice on us here. Can you somehow mute that or stop it, or Mr. Carpenter? Then we'll let Ms. Beal go.
I actually believe it's Heather listening to our recording in the background. So Heather, if you could turn down the recording or however you're listening to us, then we should be able to hear you without an echo.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
I just muted, oh, sorry.
Okay.
I just muted it. Can you hear me clearly?
We can now, Ms. Beal.
Okay. Hello, my name is Heather Beal. I have lived at 4236 Crocker Avenue in the Morningside neighborhood of Edina for nearly 28 years. I'm calling to say that I support Amir Masagi's proposal for the city of Edina to start collecting data as recommended by the city-adopted racial equity work plan as soon as possible. I also have family members and friends who have worked in law enforcement, including my brother who started his career as a police officer, then worked as a sheriff's deputy before going on to complete his PhD in informational technology. Speaking with my brother, as well as dozens of fellow Edina residents, prompted me to publicly voice my support for this first step. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beal.
Sure.
Members, I do not have anyone else on the line right now. I would recommend that we wait just a minute or two before moving on, as there is a slight delay in the broadcast, as we all just heard. I will watch my clock, and when it turns to 7:17, I'll let you know to move forward with the meeting if I don't see any new callers.
All right.
Callers, I think it's safe for you to move forward.
All right. Thank you, Director Benarad. Next, we have comments from our city manager about community comments that were made at the prior meeting, although some of the comments made tonight, Manager Neal may be able to address, but I'll leave it up to his discretion here. So, Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll stick to addressing the two comments that were posed to the council at the last meeting, and we'll do some further research on the questions that were offered to you tonight. We had two callers last week and two questions posed. The first question was whether or not we could change the age cohorts that we use to show the age of folks who are infected with the coronavirus and in the display in our COVID-19 dashboard on our website. We've had a chance to talk with Bloomington Public Health, who coordinates the collection of that data for us, and our own GIS and website staff, and we will be able to do that. We will have that completed, I'm told, by the end of this week. So that one we can answer in the affirmative. The second question was whether or not we could open our Project Docs software to residents so that they could use the software to check on or to view building plans that are well, for whatever reason. And that's a little more difficult to respond to today. I can't give you an affirmative response that we are able to do that. It's a complicated IT change. We are working on it. I can tell you that if we can do it from an IT and an IT security standpoint, we will try to do that. We do understand that sometimes folks have an interest in what's happening next to them, particularly in a residential redevelopment setting. We want them to be able to see and verify for themselves what a housing, particularly a site plan or an elevation, might look like. So we know that's important, and we are trying to work on it. If we do have a request that we receive via sort of the conventional open meetings or public data requests, we will fill that, of course. But if there's a way that we can do this and create a more self-service environment for folks who are interested in that, we're going to try to do that. That's what I have for you.
All right. If that seems to be technologically difficult to be able to provide that information to the public electronically, can folks make an appointment to come into the building department and review plans in the building department?
They can make an appointment to discuss them and to receive them somehow. So yes, we can do that. We probably aren't going to have customer traffic back into that department, but we'll figure out some kind of an arrangement for them to be seen.
All right, so they could pick up potential hard copies of plans
Right.
at the front desk at City Hall.
If what they're asking for is public data and public documents, yes, we would provide them just like we would any other public data or public documents.
Okay, good. That's helpful to know. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then that dashboard change, I think, will be helpful as well for folks to be able to analyze that data more effectively. Anything else, Manager Neal, or did that prompt any potential inquiries from any council members based upon the information Manager Neal provided? Okay. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. That's the next portion of the main agenda. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda in its entirety.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion by Member Fisher, second by Member Staunton to adopt the consent agenda in its entirety. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, with respect to that motion.
Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Brindle,
Aye.
Member Fisher,
Aye.
Member Staunton,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The consent agenda items are adopted. Let's see, there were a couple of, I thought, let me read these. Those grants, those donations to the city, I thought that merited some recognition here. It's a short list, but I think an important list. That one of the resolutions that we adopted in the consent agenda is a resolution accepting donations on behalf of the city. That has to be done with a 4/5 vote. And to the Park and Rec Department, we had a couple of families donate significant funding, $3,200 apiece for benches. I'm assuming benches in memory of loved ones that have passed away that were residents of Edina. And so Larry Swanby, there was a $3,200 contribution there for a bench, and Iris Berggren. Thank you to both Iris Berggren and Larry Swanby for those $3,200 donations for benches. Much appreciated. And then on to the next portion of the agenda, which is special recognitions and presentations. And we have two matters here. And the first thing is something that we do annually, and that is a proclamation we read regarding Constitution Week. Mary Kay Brown, who's a member of the Keewaydin chapter for the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution, is here to accept the proclamation. Ms. Brown, welcome. Nice to have you with us in this.
Thank you very much for having me, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the council too.
I'm going to read the proclamation, then the council will adopt it. And if you have a few comments you wish to make, we'll do that at that point in time. The proclamation for Constitution Week, which is the period September 17th to the 23rd, 2020, reads as follows. Whereas it is the privilege of all Americans to commemorate the 233rd anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America with appropriate ceremonies and activities. And whereas it is fitting and proper to officially recognize this magnificent document and the anniversary of its creation. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuance of a proclamation by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Edina, Minnesota, does hereby proclaim the week of September 17th to the 23rd as Constitution Week in the City of Edina, and urges all citizens of the City of Edina to study the Constitution, reflect on the privilege of being an American with all of the rights and responsibilities that privilege involves, and reaffirm the ideals of the U.S. Constitution. Is there a motion to adopt that proclamation?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Member Brindle, second by Member Anderson to adopt the proclamation as read regarding Constitution Week. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Clerk Allison.
Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Brindle,
Aye.
Member Fisher,
Aye.
Member Staunton,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. the proclamation declaring Constitution Week as September 17th through the 23rd is adopted. And Ms. Brown, any comments on your part
Well,
with
very
regard to
briefly,
Constitution Week?
I hope it's brief. I would like to thank you and the council for the declaration, the proclamation of Constitution Week. And it was initiated, as you said, or brought into being by Public Law 915, 64 years ago. President Eisenhower signed it into law in 1956. Did you know that the only crime mentioned in the Constitution is treason? Or that the Constitution has 4,440 words? Or that a man named Jacob Shallis, a Pennsylvania General Assembly clerk, penned the document for $30? Or that President Washington issued a proclamation and a congressional resolution established the first National Thanksgiving Day on November 26, 1789, in gratitude for the Constitution? And Washington wrote the Marquis de Lafayette that he considered the Constitution little short of a miracle. Would I have time, Mr. Mayor, to read the preamble to the Constitution?
Yes, please take the time to do that. I think we would all benefit from that.
Okay. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor and Council. I appreciate your doing this. I'm sorry we can't have posters and things like that down at the city building, but I'm hoping, as I'm sure you do too, that this will soon subside and we will get back to something else. Are there any questions I could answer?
Any questions for Ms. Brown? Ms. Brown, we'll try to get you a signed copy. I don't know if it'll be electronically signed or hand signed, but there's usually a nice embossed proclamation on beautiful paper that we have. I don't know if we'll be able to get that to you or not, but we'll see what we can do.
Well, thank you so very much. I appreciate this opportunity.
And thanks for being with us this evening in this new virtual world we're operating in.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Best to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next matter and the final matter on this portion of the agenda is an update from our Hennepin County Sheriff, Dave Hutchinson. And this is not the first time the sheriff has been with us. And it's been, I think, COVID and civil unrest. It has been an active part to the beginning of your career as the sheriff. It's not brand new. You're not brand new to that career, but it has been an interesting time for all of us and stressful. I'm sure for you and your officers as well. So we look forward to your update, Sheriff. Thanks for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. As the Mayor said, I've been before you, and it's always an honor. Edina is a great city in our county. My parents live there. I spent a lot of time there with them. It's a great city. So again, thank you for having me. And I also wanted to thank the Chief Nelson, and the men and women of the Edina Police Department. They are a very committed and honorable group of men and women who serve the community with dignity and respect every day. And unfortunately, I was down there last night, and I saw the wonderful response from the consortium of ESU teams and cops from all over the Southwest corridor on the Edina. So I was able to chat with them about the unfortunate incident. But again, a great group of men and women. You should be proud of them, as I am. As you said, Mayor, it's been a challenging year. I've been in office a little over a year and a half, so January will be 2 years, and we've not had much time to relax. But we don't need the rest. The Hennepin County Sheriff's Office is, of course, here 24/7. But it's been challenging, but we've risen to the occasion because of the brave men and women of the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. I'm proud to lead them. In my opinion, the best group of men and women in public safety in the world. we're doing a lot of stuff in Edina as well as other parts of the county. I have a few numbers that are pretty boring and they don't mean much, but just kind of shows the partnership between Edina and our special units, our investigative units, our crime lab, our BOTA Found Offender Task Force. We're kind of an agency that we're not a huge patrol-driven agency, but we are an intel-based, investigative-based agency, which we offer our support to all of the 35, 36 police departments in the county. Significant events, obviously, we work well with Edina. Last year, some auto thefts that we helped with. Southwest Drug Task Force has received a lot of legal narcotics. They did a good job. We work well with our CISA, which is Criminal Information Sharing and Analysis. That's basically kind of like an intel unit where we offer our support. We're going to be, I think the case you're talking about, we monitor a large amount of Apple Watch thefts within Edina in the stores in the mall and nearby. We will apprehend a lot of those people through investigations. Again, partnership's great. I don't have any complaints with Edina and the public safety officials. A little more about the county. We have a tri-wellness program when I started, which is mind, body, and spirit. What I think is important is our deputies need to be happy, healthy, and sane to provide the best public service to the taxpayers of the county. So I've developed this. We have an on-site therapist. She's there full-time. We've hired 4 chaplains. We have getting our gyms upgraded. We're allowing people some time to work out. But we're also adding now a financial aspect. So we're helping our deputies plan financially because, again, if you're happy, sane, healthy, and financially secure, you're going to have less bad interactions with the public. So we're human beings. We need to be treated with respect by the administration. So I've made sure that's my number one goal since I've been sheriff, and it seems to be working very well. I don't want to gloat, but we won awards for our crime lab. We're one of the best in the country for a city in a metropolitan area this large. We actually still investigate property crimes, which cities like us, like Milwaukee, Denver, it's not that rich in property crimes. So car thefts, theft from auto, burglary, etc. We do any major crime throughout the metro. So if there's a suicide, homicide, etc. Like last night with the unfortunate incident at the hospital, our crime lab came and tried to get DNA off the doctor, etc. So we're not only nationally recognized, we're internationally recognized and accredited. Those men and women and the scientists and plus the deputies doing the CSI stuff are phenomenal. I'm blown away at the stuff they do. The stuff you see on TV, they are about 100 times better, but unfortunately, we don't get to do it in 28 minutes on TV. It takes us at least a few days. So that's a great. I'm always love to brag about them. I love to brag about everybody in our agency because I think we are some of the best. We talk about coronavirus, and I'll be honest, I'm sick of talking about it because it's been with us a long time. But we were able to manage our jail, the largest jail in the Midwest, outside of Cook County, Illinois. We managed it very well. Most, if not all, of the people with COVID-19 came into our jail with it. There's no spread in our jail. It's because of the brave men and women, detention deputies, plus the nursing and doctor staff. A few numbers. Before COVID, we were about 850 people. Now we're about 540 because of COVID. Right now, there's 34 that are isolated. We have quarantine cells, which are negative pressure, so they won't get everybody else sick. We tested a lot. We tested over 1,000 people. We're doing a very, very good job with that as throughout the nation, jails our sizes. And then civil unrest in Minneapolis. We've all heard of it. We've seen it. Obviously, Edina is the first tier suburb to Minneapolis, so I listened to the first callers' concerns with public safety, and I share its concerns. And Minneapolis is having a fair amount of problems, and my goal and job and my promise to the city of Edina is we're going to work the best we can with your agency, the Edina PD, to make sure that we can curtail some of that business if it does cross the border. We're working hand in hand with Chief Nelson. But, again, we're stretched thin because of budget concerns. And we have the budget issues coming up. And we need extra money through the CARES Act. And there's a couple meetings today at the county, asking what we're doing with that. But we need that money to be on track. We don't know what's going to happen in November. I think we need to be prepared for the worst and pray for the best, prepare for the worst. But that's going to cost money as well. So basically, what I said, last couple Wednesdays ago, when the rioters tore up downtown and Nickel Mall again, I saw me on TV with my staff out there. A week prior to that, people actually tried to break into the Hennepin County Jail. They broke some windows. They're unsuccessful, obviously. There's no way they can get in there. But if they break stuff, Hennepin County property, they're going up and down, breaking stuff and damaging. We're going to arrest them. The time is over of coddling people. There's a fair way to police, but we are not going to tolerate death, destruction, et cetera, et cetera. My office is committed to make sure everybody's safe, regardless of what your zip code is in Hennepin County. We can be fair, we can be righteous, but we have to maintain order in our county, and Minneapolis is the county, and I'm dedicated to that. We have to have a safe downtown, Twins, Vikings when it comes back, concerts, but also, we have to have a safe Edina, safe Eden Prairie, safe every one of the cities in the county. Partly is my job to help the chiefs maintain order, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it with respect and dignity, but we're not going to tolerate criminal destruction of our property. We're not going to tolerate violence. And the community comes together. And again, I'm going to mention the guy who first called. What can we do to curtail some of this unrest and this, disconnect between the community and the police, et cetera, the sheriff's offices? People need to support. People need to support the good work the men and women law enforcement do every single day. But also, we have to be held accountable for the things that we do. Make mistakes, or we're not without sin. We're human beings. I always tell people 3 to 6% of the population as a whole isn't necessarily great people. We pull our cops and deputies from that 3 to 6%. So we're not perfect. We'll never be perfect, but I'm striving to be as close to perfect as possible. But we need support. The silent majority needs to speak up, and you need a proper funding. You need proper funding, the police department, fire, the sheriff's office, and we can do this in a fair, fair, forward-thinking way where we treat people of color, we treat people LGBT plus better, our new immigrant community better. We can do all this and curtail violent crime, and that's through 100% partnership. And I'm going to preach on that probably until I open up for questions. Is we can be better, but we have to be better together. And public safety needs people's support, but also if we're doing something wrong, call us out on it. I'm more than willing to hear that. And we discipline cops and deputies when they screw up, and we'll continue doing that. But we need people to speak up on our behalf at this point. And I just want to thank you for your time. I think again, Edina is a special spot in my heart because my parents lived there. I do a lot of eating at restaurants and going to a few bars there in Edina. So I love Edina. I hope Edina is successful. I'll open up to questions if I have any. And again, thank you for your time, Mayor and City Council.
Thank you, Sheriff. Indeed, I think we all recognize that we, living in Hennepin County, that our crime lab has this tremendous reputation, as does the examiner's office, and speaks of the good work being done at the county. In fact, I think it's fair to say that all the operations in Hennepin County are probably nationally recognized and admired, including your operation as the sheriff on our behalf. So are there questions for the sheriff or comments that any of the council members wish to make? Anyone? Okay. Yes, Member Fisher.
I just wanted to thank the sheriff for coming and for talking and joining us every year. And, it's a tough time to be in law enforcement for sure. And I certainly understand the the importance of accountability, but also supporting our law enforcement and making sure that we have that balance. So thank you for sharing those comments.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks, Sheriff, for being with us this evening. As Member Fisher said, we really appreciate these annual updates, and then the periodic interaction we have with you during the year. That's greatly appreciated as well. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Have a good day.
Good night. That completes that portion of the agenda. Reports and recommendations, and now we're going to move on to. Wait a minute. That was special recognitions and presentations. We're going to move on to the public hearing portion of the agenda. We have just one public hearing matter in front of us this evening, and Director Milner has this matter. Director Milner.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Sharing my screen here. So before you tonight is a vacation of easements for 5012 Bedford Avenue, embodied in Resolution 2020-89. So the existing right-of-way is shown in the red area. That's what the request has been. The application to vacate is that right now it's just a landscaped area. The area in yellow is a current alley for transportation purposes. It's a paved alley. But the red area is just trees, overgrown area that the applicant to the south would like vacated. So we are reviewing the need for drainage and utility easements. In the resolution tonight, we're saying to vacate this contingent on new easements. I have been having discussions with the applicant about, do we actually need those? And part of those discussions that I'm continuing to have is with the private utilities to see if they fully understood where this vacation is and if they truly have infrastructure in that requested area. So by the time we make the decision at the October 7th meeting, I will have a recommendation for you in regards to whether we need those easements or not. If we do need the easements, there's 3 properties that would have to grant those easements, and that's the difficult part because the applicant, 5012 Bedford, is in the red area. They would dedicate an easement in that red box. The yellow one would be 5321 Interlochen, and then the blue smaller area shaded there would be 5329. So there's 3 different properties. One of them is a rental home, so the owner is not at that location. So potentially 3 different mortgage companies, and it can be very difficult to get the required easement. So we'll be reviewing the need for those easements and then talking with the applicant and having that recommendation when you make your final decision on October 7th. So I would recommend we continue to review this. I will continue to review the easements, and that council makes a motion to continue the public hearing until noon on Wednesday, September 23rd on the Better Together Edina site, and then prepare for that final recommendation from staff on the October 7th city council meeting, and we can adjust that resolution if we find the need for, or not the need for those easements. And I'll stand for any questions.
All right. Questions for Director Milner on this matter? Could you put the schematic back up again, Director Milner, that shows the colored portions? There you go. So this, go ahead. Member Brindle, was it?
Yes. So I'm thinking about the last work session we had, which was about flooding, and we looked at all the flood maps in Morningside. One of the comments that I recall was thinking about the easements that had been vacated over the years, and if we had a chance to do it over again, maybe we wouldn't do that. So in looking at where this easement is and where the new easements would be placed, are you confident from a stormwater perspective that there is, because this is pretty tight, what I'm seeing here in the blue square, and the easement is of considerable size. Are you comfortable with being able to find a new location for that easement from a stormwater perspective?
Yeah, Councilmember Brindle, the red area, that's 14 feet wide, and it's the length of their lot of this lot. It's 14 feet wide.
Yep.
And that's exactly my concern too with vacating it with no easements. Are we going to see a future need coming for that area? And that's why we're recommending drainage and utility easements, but I will be reviewing that stormwater need with Ross. We'll have a discussion because looking at the flood shapes, there's nothing real close that we think could be here. But again, until we get to a point down the road, we don't know for sure. So those are the discussions we're going to have before we come back to this body on October 7th.
Okay.
Other questions from council members? So Director Milner, right now, it looks like the alley comes off, is that off Interlochen, and then it makes a 90-degree turn and goes down between the houses? Is there any reason why there couldn't be a future need to have that alley sort of punch through the red area and go over to Bedford? Obviously, that hasn't happened in the past, but you must have analyzed that issue as well as to whether or not there was an advantage in having an alley go straight through and clean out some of the undergrowth or the greenery that's in that area.
Yeah, Mayor, we reviewed it. We don't think we need that from a transportation standpoint for vehicles. We also reviewed it from a sidewalk standpoint. Would this be a good spot? And Interlochen Boulevard is literally right just off the map. You look to the east of Bedford, right here, this had the same alleyway in the original plat, and that was vacated many years ago. And now there's no easements and homes have been built within that old plat area. So there is some precedent of vacating similar areas within this neighborhood.
Okay. And it sounds like you've got the same concerns that Member Brindle expressed, that you had expressed at our last meeting. So those are important things. Anyone else from the council wish to ask Director Milner a question at this point in time? All right, I'm going to open this matter up for public testimony. It is a public hearing. If residents would like to provide testimony in this matter, call 800-374-0221. Conference ID number is 459-1089. An operator will ask for your name and address. You'll be put in a queue to speak. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in the event you weren't on the call earlier, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And Manager Neal is doing our timing, and he'll let you know when you go over the 3-minute mark or when you hit the 3-minute mark. And then you can wrap up your comments from a public testimony standpoint. So the matter is now open for public testimony or public inquiry. Director Benarott, do we have anybody in the queue?
Do not have anyone in the queue right now. We still have one of our community commenters on. I would recommend that we wait just a minute or so, as there is a delay in the broadcast. That will give anyone who's watching from home time to call in and get into the queue. I'll watch my clock, and when it turns to 7:48, I will let you know to move on.
All right, thank you.
It is 7:49, and I don't have anyone in the queue, so I think it's safe to move on.
All right, thank you. Council members, any other questions for Director Milner at this point in time? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing at noon on September 23rd, 2020, and to continue action on the item to the October 7, 2020 City Council meeting. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Anderson, second by Member Fisher. Any further discussion on the motion as stated? Roll call, please. Clerk Allison.
Member Anderson.
Aye.
Member Brindle.
Aye.
Member Fisher.
Aye.
Member Staunton.
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The motion to close the public hearing at noon on September 23rd, 2020, and to continue the action on the item to the October 7, 2020 City Council meeting is approved. Thank you for your participation on this matter. Move on now to reports and recommendations. First matter there is proposed preliminary budget adoption, establishing a proposed taxable levy for 2021. Manager Neal is going to introduce the topic. Our Finance Director, Don Urim, is with us this evening as well. And we're going to talk about a couple of options that we have and that our staff has created based upon the situation that we've been in with this COVID-19 era. So Manager Neal, do you want to lead off?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Your Honor. We're pleased to come to you tonight with one of the most important actions that the City Council takes on the proposed budget for 2021, and that is certification of the maximum preliminary levy for 2021. The act you take tonight does not approve the final levy, but it does determine what the maximum levy might be for the purposes of informing the public of what their taxes might be later this fall when property tax notices are sent out. We have a presentation for you tonight, most of which you have seen, most of before, I'll say. It's a combination of a presentation that talks about our capital improvement planning and then talks about our budget and preliminary levy. Mr. Urim is going to handle the capital improvement plan discussion, and then I will handle the budget and preliminary levy piece, and we will then stand for questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Urim at this point.
So I believe Lisa's trying to pull up the PowerPoint presentation. So as soon as that's up, we'll start. Scott, and I believe that you'll begin the discussion talking about the kind of process and work plan and that sort of thing, like we did at the work session.
Yes. All right, let's move it forward. So I have talked a little bit already about our agenda for tonight. This is the kind of the full scale of our budget of the City of Edina city government budget. If you look at all the money that we would propose to spend in 2020, it's about $131 million. And you can break that down into three subject areas: governmental funds, enterprise funds, and internal service funds. Governmental funds is about 3/4 of what we spend. That's where our general fund is. That's where our debt service is, and our capital spending is. So that's the bulk of the money that we spend in any particular year. This year is no different. Our enterprise funds are where you would find the accounting for our utilities, our liquor, and then all of our park enterprises. So Edinburgh Park, the Aquatic Center, Braemar Golf, Braemar Ice, etc. And then our internal service funds. Showing this on this page like this is relatively new for the council. This is where we try to show you how we handle sort of our standard overhead costs in our budget. Next. As you know, we have a 2-year budget process. So when you think about the budget that you're looking at tonight, the spending piece of it, the service programming piece of it, was really decided by the council in December of 2019. We had a long budget process in 2019. We do that budget process every other year in odd years. So we'll do it again in 2021. So the numbers that we are looking at for 2021 were formed, over a year ago. So it's important that we remind ourselves of how to do that. In even years, we use that to update our 5-year CIP. And so that's where we've spent most of our time and energy this year. This is a graphic that talks about how our values and our vision and our planning really do drive the finances of this city. That's not always true. Sometimes many cities look at their fiscal conditions and set a maximum of what they want to spend, and they'll accomplish whatever they can under that maximum. We have gone about this a different way in Edina for many years, and that is, let's determine what it is we want to accomplish as a city government. Then let's see how much that costs, and then we'll make some budget and value decisions after that. And so this is just a depiction of how we do that. Mayor, this is what you were asking me about earlier today, the 4 sort of goals or 4 buckets of spending, right? So strong foundation, reliable service, better together, livable city. These are the areas that we group all of our work plans and all of our spending plans through this set of goals. Timeline, December 3rd, 2019 was the evening when the City Council approved the budget that we are asking you to grant formal approval to tonight for 2021. In March, in spring, is when we started the kickoff of the CIP analysis this year. A lot of that CIP analysis occurs kind of in the staff realm. We bring it back to the council in July. We have a discussion about it with you in August. And we fixed our HRA levy already, but tonight is the night where we're asking council to give tentative approval to our preliminary levies that will fund that CIP. The final adoption of the budget and CIP are then scheduled for December 1st this year, and we'll have a public hearing that night as well. Don, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Scott. So just a little bit about the prioritization process. As Scott has mentioned, it really starts globally in all the departments with the department heads preparing their requests for the year. And these are gradually funneled down through the department heads and goes to our prioritization committee, who makes a recommendation to ELT, city management staff, as well as the city council. So, and that's where we're at tonight, is a discussion about the recommended CIP for the next 6 years. So this slide may seem like it's a little out of place, but it really has a direct relationship to our CIP. As we've talked to the city council in the past, we've presented, and the council has endorsed, as debt service drops off, the dollar amount is transferred to the CIP levy. So a couple of items that I'd like to point out is the City Hall debt service is dropping off this year. And then I believe it's in 2027, the debt service for the gymnasium is dropping off. So, and that's shown graphically on this next slide. So if you look under Lisa, there you go. So if you just look under the debt service fund levies, the City Hall debt service, the last year we levied for that was this year. And so that dollar amount is dropping down to the capital improvement plan levy for 2021. And if you look under the gymnasium debt service out in the projection for 2025, that will be the last year we levy for the gym debt. And then that dollar amount drops down to the capital improvement plan levy. One of the things I'd wanted to point out on this slide, though, under the CIP plan levy, without the additional debt service dropping off, the CIP levy remains constant at $2 million. And considering the amount of projects that we have unfunded, that may be an item that we'd want to discuss in the future about a possible gradual increase on an annual basis. So you've seen this slide before. There really is 3 columns of funding that we look at. And there's not a lot of available funding resources for capital improvements plan. If you look at the first column, the majority of the funding has already been allocated through the equipment levy, special assessment, franchise fees, utility revenues is one of the bigger ones. There's some money available to prioritize, which is the utility transfer, the liquor transfer, and the CIP levy. And then on occasion, there are some other available resources. That's not, the items listed in this column is not something that we count on in our planning process. So this year, the committee, which consisted of representatives from all of the departments, really took a fundamental approach to prioritizing projects. They looked at it from a high, medium, and low category. And as they looked at it, they looked at 4 additional items, which is public and staff safety or code requirements, immediate asset or infrastructure preservation, the expansion of services, and contingencies. So really a different way to look at how we prioritize. Historically, we've had, we put together these complicated matrices and scored projects, which I don't know added anything to the process. So the committee recommended projects of about $1.5 million for the next 3 years. This covers all unfunded projects with a high priority. The interesting thing that they did this year is to create an asset preservation funding pool of approximately $500,000 a year to cover immediate needs. Things come up during the year, and they've established this kind of funding to meet those needs. And they plan to meet every 6 months to reprioritize the use of this funding pool. This is just an overview of the CIP by category. There were 265 projects that were submitted. This is similar to previous years. The dollar amount increased from about 189 million to 268 million. This is primarily due to the addition of a 6th year. So we're proposing a 6-year capital improvements plan. And as we've discussed, without additional funding, many projects will continue to be deferred. The largest, can you go, there you go. Nope, can you back up, Lisa? So I just wanted to point out the largest category by far is infrastructure, and followed up by buildings. So this is just a CIP by funding source. You can see that the largest total is the utility fund at about 29%, followed up by the construction fund at 23%. But by far, based on the projects that were submitted, unfunded projects consist of about 40%. So this is a new slide that we put together for tonight. So what this shows is of the projects recommended by the committee, these are the project categories for the next 2 years. So buildings at 37%, the asset preservation, which is that funding pool at 25%, and parks at 17%. Now, just to put things into perspective, though, from a dollar amount, so we have available over the next 2 years just over $4 million. So buildings, based on the proposed recommendations, buildings would use approximately 1.5 million of that. The asset preservation would use $1 million of that, and the parks department would get approximately 700,000 of the $4 million over the next 2 years. And this is just kind of a change from what's happened historically, because we haven't had a funding pool per se. So it's nice to be able to allocate projects primarily in the area of Park and Rec where we have a number of unfunded projects. So our challenges, we have $102 million in unfunded projects over the next 6 years. 72 million is categorized as buildings, 29 million as Park and Rec. We have $2 million per year to allocate of the CIP levy, and this is a primary funding source for, park infrastructure replacement. And then the last thing is just to talk a little bit about the equipment levy. So based on the equipment that the departments have submitted, so there are occasional gaps in the funding revenues over the expenditures. And how we manage that is we manage the equipment fund on an overall basis. So we look to balance the expenditures versus the revenues. Scott, on to the budget.
Very good. So this is our proposed levy for 2021. And I would note we're going to show you two scenarios tonight. One is proposed 2021. Again, I'll just say this is what you've seen throughout the year. This is what was approved tentatively by the council in December of 2019. And it shows you by kind of our major funds, at least the major funds that receive tax levy support, the general fund, arts and culture, debt service, construction, and HRA. It depicts what we did in 2019, our actuals for 2020, and proposed for 2021. The next scenario is alternate one. Got to go back. There you go, right there. So this is the alternate one, 2021 levy option. This is what council asked to see the impacts of this when we updated you previously. This particular levy option is one that creates a zero levy increase for the median single-family home. So from a residential standpoint, that was the variable that we were trying to fix in this analysis. So if you try to create a levy that creates a zero impact increase on that median single family home, this is what happens. We decrease our general fund levy from a 5.95% increase to a 2.92 increase, and then that creates a gap of about $1.2 million in revenue that we need to support the proposed spending and service programs. And we fill that gap in this scenario with money from our budget stabilization fund. One of the things we like to explain every year with our tax levy is, what is the new money spent on? So in this case, most of the new money that comes in is spent for sort of programmed wage and benefit increases, programmed in the sense that people that are on pay programs or in collective bargaining contracts, this is where most of that money goes to. And then smaller charges to our internal service funds, and then other budget changes and overhead payments. Estimated levy impacts, we try to distill, what happens to, how does this feel? How does a particular levy scenario feel to the median single family homeowner in terms of the taxes that they're paying? In 2020, the median value home in Edina pays about $131 a month in property taxes to fund city provided services. They are also paying taxes, of course, to the school and the county, but our services are about $131. If we go forward with the proposed property tax levy that number will go to $136 per month. So about a $5, a little less than $5 increase per month. The total estimated market value is going up by 3.7% for taxes payable in 2021. So that's a pretty good increase. The impact of that is that it helps to decrease the impact of a 5.95% property tax increase. So a 5.95 property tax increase feels to the median single family homeowner like a 3.7% increase, because that's what's happening to their actual property taxes. For the alternate one, this is where we look at that impact. It's got a 0 impact to the median single family home. So that taxpayer doesn't see or feel any increase from 2020 to 2021 in this scenario. City taxes are about the same. We use the budget stabilization to do the buy down. The downside to this is that we're doing it at a time when really most of our property owners for 2021 are going to see a property on the residential side. Most of them are going to be seeing a property tax decrease anyway, not an increase. They're going to pay the same or less. So over 80% of our property taxpayers under the proposed preliminary tax levy will pay the same or less than they paid in this year. So the last bullet on this page is without additional BSF use. One of the things that we're talking about in alternate one is that it does create, we think on a short-term basis, a structural decrease in the link between our property tax preliminary levy and and the spending levels that we have become accustomed to, which has always been that our property tax levy funds about 70% of our expenses in the general fund. We would be less than that in that scenario, and that's something we just got to keep our eye on, because we don't want that to get too far out of line, because if we do, somewhere along the line we're going to have to catch it up, and that's where this projected 2022 tax levy increase might be as much as 8.84 if we have to catch it up in 1 year. This is the HRA levy. The HRA is separate from the city. HRA levies are shown on property taxes the same as city property taxes. But there's a separate line item for them. The proposed HRA levy is about $9 a year for the median single family home. We've talked about this breakout as well before. This is what it looks like from a residential taxpayer. 21%, that's the pie on the left. The pie graph on the right is for a commercial taxpayer. And you can tell how they're different. They're notably different in terms of the tax, not the tax burdens necessarily, but where the tax dollars go. In the commercial side, more than 50% of taxes and tax base go to fund the fiscal disparities in the state of Minnesota. So more than half of those property taxes are going outside of our city. On the residential side, about 21% of the total tax bill is coming to the city, 31% to the county, and 40% to the Edina schools. We've had a healthy growth in our market value, our estimated market value. This is how we measure the tax base of the city. This is the best metric to do that. And as you can see, from 2014 to 2021, we've had very notable growth, almost a 50% growth in our total estimated market value, from $9 billion in 2014 to 13.3 billion in 2021. This is what the impact of our property taxes are for the median single-family home. This is a graph we show the council every year. In this particular version of that graph, it starts in 2011, it ends in 2021. You can trace the change in the median single-family home. And the green line on the bottom is the city's property tax, and the line above that is the total tax bill. So that includes all the other taxing bodies. And remember, this is just for a residential property. We also try to show what that tax impact is for a mythical $400,000 home. So what would the taxes be for a $400,000 home if that home didn't change in value from 2011 to 2021? This is just another way of isolating our impacts on tax burden. And again, the green line is on the bottom and the blue line on the top is the total value. So you can see for that home, if the home value of the home is fixed during that time period, our impact on it has been really next to zero in terms of rate of change. And another measure is the median single-family home with a CPI adjustment, so that you can see how the impact of inflation has changed those numbers as well. So tonight we're asking the council to certify the preliminary tax levy, and to take that action will be then translated and passed along to Hennepin County. Hennepin County uses that information to create the property tax notice, which is then sent out in mid-November, and that is the notice that people then get to understand what their taxes could be for 2021. Then we have a budget hearing and a levy decision that the council makes in December. We also want to continue to take on the CIP. We want to take council input yet this fall and on the 2021-2026 capital improvement plan, and make a final action on that either December 1st or December 15th. And with that, I think we're happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you. Questions from council members about the proposed budget versus alternate number one? That seems to me to be worthy of a conversation as we've thought about ways and asked our staff to think about ways that we can moderate impacts on people during this pandemic. They've come up with at least one idea, and I think, Manager Neal, might be worthwhile talking about our rate of tax collection, both the first half and projected second half, and then whether we are looking foreseeably at a change in how the state might allocate tax between residential properties and commercial properties in the future based on some of the stresses we're seeing in the commercial property area due to COVID-19 and then civil unrest as well.
Sure. I'll start this answer, and then Mr. Urim can jump in when I'm done to improve or correct my answer. We in Minnesota, we pay our property taxes to local governments twice a year, or at most twice a year. Some people pay them once a year, even though they can pay them twice a year, but we usually pay them in halves, right? And the first half is due sometime typically in May, and the second half is due typically in November. One of the ways that, and we typically collect about 50% in the first half and 50% in the second half. Sometimes it's a little more than 50% in the second half because we'll typically receive kind of payments from previous years if people have not paid, straggling kind of tax payments from other sorts of situations. We'll typically receive those in the second half. So sometimes that one's a little more than just the 50%. We did receive, we were concerned about what we would receive in the first half this year, given the economic shock that the virus created for us and around the country. And we were pleased to report to you that we received 51% of the property taxes that we budgeted and expected to receive. So over half, actually, a little over half in the first half. Now, they came in over a longer period of time than we're used to because the county gave an extension to folks to pay their property taxes without penalty until the middle of July. So that took a while for the money to kind of come all the way in. And I think we're expecting something similar to that at the end of the year too from the county, although I don't think they have announced that quite yet, but I won't be surprised if that's what happens. So that's the concern for us at this point is, are people going to be able to pay their property taxes in 2020? We hope they will. But we also are concerned about that going forward as well. Now, the future orientation that you mentioned is one that we are concerned about, and that is that one of the benefits of the property tax system that cities, schools, and counties have in Minnesota is a lag in terms of how property, how impacts in the private real estate markets can impact us. The value that is the market value and the forces that are shaping market values in 2020 don't really impact us on the taxation side until we begin levying and collecting taxes in 2022. That's how much lag there is in terms of our property tax system. So when you think about the economic impacts that we're seeing and potentially the decrease in commercial real estate values as people work more from home and less from an office, and the demise of retail and other kind of office situations, those kind of things that we're seeing today, they don't really have, they impact the private property owners immediately, and we see that, but they don't really impact our property tax collections until a year and a half into the future. So we do have some concerns, and this is what happened to us as well in 2008, 9, and 10, the same kind of pattern. So we do have some concerns about what's going to happen in 2022 and 2023, because I think that's when the kind of forces you see today are going to come home to roost for us.
Have you reached any internal judgments about the proposed budget for 2021, where it would have just slightly under a $5 per month impact on the median price single family home at $550,000, and the prospect of, let's put it this way, of holding off on buying down the rate from the budget stabilization fund, using those monies next year or the year after if we see an impact on commercial properties, and instead trying to go with the proposed rate that we had established for 2021 that feels like to the single family homeowner an increase of 3.7%. That makes sense?
It does. I think our recommendation between administration and the finance department anyway is to go forward with the proposed levy as proposed. One of the things that happens in our property tax system, especially on the budget making side, is we get little pieces of information at certain times during the process, and sometimes those little pieces of information can have a very big impact on how you view what you're doing. And one example of that this past week was we had a chance to have some communication with our own city assessor. And what we do on the budget making side is we try to form our costs and we get a total levy and we compute the tax rate, and then we ask our city assessor, given these two factors, how many people are going to see their taxes increase in the upcoming year? How many are going to see them decrease? And we ask him for a little bit more detail than that. But what's happening in our tax base right now, because we've had growth and because our expenses haven't grown as much as our economic growth, we have a situation where 82% of our residential taxpayers will pay the same or less in 2021 compared to 2020 if we go forward with the proposed property tax levy. I was pretty surprised to see that number. That's not how that typically works. So that is influential to me in the sense that it gives us a good idea that we're, from a moderation standpoint, having a really modest impact on our property taxpayers if we go forward with the proposed budget for 2021. Now, remember, making that kind of decision tonight, if you accept that recommendation, the only impact that has is that that's what's going to be printed on property tax notices that go into the mail. We'll still have a chance to see how residents react to that, taxpayers react to that, and we'll still have another discussion about it in December. But at this point, that's going to be our recommendation to you.
Right. That we can't go higher than the amount we set tonight, but we could go lower.
That is correct, right.
All right. Other questions for City Manager Neal or Finance Director Don Urim on this matter? Or comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Member Fisher?
So I just think, in principle, because of the lag effect, I would want to not utilize our capacity to make change in future years if we don't have to. Like, I'd like to delay that as much as we can. Now, if something changed here in the next month or so that would tell us we got to move quicker, I'd rather have that opportunity so I think we should pick the original proposal, go with that, with the intent that that's really where we're going. If we see some different movement here in the very near future, we can still pull back. But then it allows us more flexibility in the next future years where we may need it. That would be my option.
Member Anderson?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple questions. One of them being, we have, I think our projected budget stabilization fund balance projected by the end of the year is about 4.8 million, correct?
That's correct, right.
So the buy down, if we were to consider that further, would be at 1.2 million. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, yes.
Okay. So that technically would leave us at about 3.6 million still held in the budget stabilization fund if we were to try to keep this down and keep the impact of this year's tax increase down. So then the second question is, reduced expenses this year are primarily due to COVID, if I'm correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So then going forward, do we have any intention of continuing with the budget stabilization process, the moves that were made in order to control that or to create the fund?
We would continue to use that fund as a stabilization influence, and that if we have additional savings that we achieve throughout the year, whether it's 2020 or 2021, we would make a recommendation to the council to use those savings to continue to bolster that fund, with the idea that we want to be in the right position when we have to face an economy, at least for city governments, that's drastically different in a couple of years.
Yes. Okay, so we intend to carry the processes in the stabilization fund forward as well.
We do.
So potentially that fund could grow.
It could.
All right. Well, in general, I would almost always say if we can negate impact by reducing an amount by a relatively small, by about 25% on the nose of our projected balance, that's a good idea. But in this case, I don't think so. I tend to agree with Member Fisher, basically because we'll see what happens with our second half tax collections. I think that there'll be some pressure there, especially on the commercial side. But I think our first half collections next year and pay 2021 are going to see an equal amount of pressure. And as you mentioned, Manager Neal, going forward a couple of years even, we could continue to see those issues. So I think it's better, given the minimal impact that the proposed tax levy makes on homeowners, and I think an understanding on the part of the taxpayer that it's better to have a cash reserve, especially at this time. I think that makes the most sense to me.
Yeah,
Member Anderson.
I would just remind the council that, we created that budget stabilization fund for a very specific reason. It doesn't get spent unless council authorizes it to get spent. So you do maintain some control over kind of where and when that money is deployed into our budgeting system.
Member Brindle or Member Staunton?
The budget stabilization fund, I think from what I heard from Member Fisher is a conservative approach. It's a careful approach. We really have no idea, I don't think, how long this economy is going to continue, or whether it's going to get worse, how much worse it's going to get. And I was looking at the slide 26 showed the taxes on the median value home over the years, and that one, and it made me wonder. So we're not seeing the drop yet. I guess you could go back to 26. Sorry. We're not seeing the drop yet that we saw in 2013, 2012 to 2013. I don't know if we can anticipate seeing a drop like that as a result of this economy and when that's going to start to appear. So making decisions for a future that we're uncertain of, it just seems like we do have to do everything we can to protect ourselves, and most importantly, to protect the people and the values in our city. So I would agree with what Member Fisher said. The other thing that I like to think about in looking at the amount of the levy increase is nobody likes to hear that their taxes are going up, but when you think about the cost of living, and that alone causes an increase in what the city has to pay. The cost of living increase continues to be 3% on a shrinking dollar, and so to the degree that the residents of our city are going to realize an increase of 3.7%. And cost of living increase is 3%, maybe just shy of 3%. It seems that the levy increase makes a lot of sense, and just reminding those who are curious what does make up the increases in the budget is that staff and personnel costs are a huge part of the budget, and that we have to make sure that our budget is healthy enough to maintain that. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Manager Neal.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm glad Councilmember Brindle brought us back to this slide. because this slide it graphically depicts what we were discussing earlier about what we think might be our future 2 or 3 years from now. Because you can see that we didn't hit our low point in how the stress of 2009 and 10, how it impacted us until 2013. And this depicts what that was like. That slide started in about 2010 and slid all the way to 13 before it went up, every year since that time. It would have to be incredibly destructive for our values as a community to sink back to 2013. But it's possible that they could flatten or even slightly decrease, like what you saw in that 2011 to 2014 timeframe. So that's the dynamic that we're concerned about is going to occur a few years from now, and we want to be ready for it.
Member Staunton?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I think I'm inclined to keep our powder dry. I think we've done good planning on this budget stabilization fund. And the two things that make me feel like we can wait a little bit is one, the news on the revenues and the collections being solid, and two, the fact that even with this, 82% of our residents won't experience an increase. And so I think, and then third would be the fact that we can always change even in December and adjust on this if we see a change in the revenue collection. So given the lag time here, I think it's smart to keep our powder dry and wait to use this when we have to use it. Right now, it seems like we can get by with this. So I'm inclined to support what my colleagues have articulated.
Thank you, Member Staunton. When we first got these proposals, I was intrigued with alternate number 1, but when I saw that with the work that we'd done before on the proposed 2021 budget and its city impact, in that 82% of our taxpayers would be paying the same or less in 2021 than they did in 2020. I felt the same way Member Staunton just expressed it well with keeping your powder dry. That we can use, and our other colleagues have said it, said the same thing in different ways. That I think when we contemplate that there might be some impact on commercial property values in the future, and that the burden shifts more towards residential, there could be a more appropriate time for us to use that budget stabilization fund. And as Member Anderson points out, it's going to be growing here as we probably leave that in place for the next 2, 3, 4 years to make sure that we get through this rough patch in the economy as we try to wend our way between making sure people stay safe from a public health standpoint and also try to get the economy to get back to its former vitality. So I think I too would be in favor of going along with what was proposed for 2021, reassessing it between now and December 1st when we have to make a final determination. I think, Manager Neal, one thing that you pointed out was that we had 51% tax collection payments for the first period, but I think, doesn't that reflect itself in essentially 99% of our taxpayers making those first half payments or a payment for the full year, which is pretty astounding, I think, when you think of what's going on in some other communities around the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's much lower in some communities that who are really struggling right now.
Yep. So that figure, that percentage, that 99% of our taxpayers were able to make those first half tax payments, whether they be residential or commercial, leads me to be somewhat optimistic about those second half tax payments. And then on a broader basis, I think the vacancy rate in the region now commercially is about 10%. And in some of the other parts of the world, I was on this call yesterday where we were told that in places where they are managing, I think, more effectively the coronavirus, like in London and in Paris, vacancy rates in those commercial areas are down to 2%. So I think when you look at what the headwinds are that we face, we're talking about potential resurgence of the virus, some potential accelerating economic dislocation for some folks in our community, and we've been trying to help those folks make it through. But on the positive side, our region really has some major strengths. You remember during the Great Recession, we were the first economy to bounce back with the highest rate of employment. And I'm told that our external market signals are really strong. And then we've got some other things that we're going to be working on as a region, as a community, and moving, I think, from talk to action on racial justice related issues. But when I think about the economy overall, I think we need to have some faith and confidence that things are going to get better. So I'm comfortable staying with what's proposed as well for now, and then evaluating it between now and the 1st of December when we have to make a decision for next year. So there was a resolution as part of this, and it was Resolution 2020-88, which would
That's correct.
adopt the proposed budget and establish the proposed tax levy payable in 2021 at I think 5.95% for the total levy, which has a sort of a real world impact of making it feel like for a taxpayer is 3.7%. Is that the resolution that you'd like to see us pass, Manager Neal?
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
All right. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2020-88 and adopt a preliminary proposed budget levy and establish that proposed tax levy payable in 2021 at 5.95%?
So moved.
Second.
Member Staunton moves, Member Brindle seconds. Further discussion? Roll call, please, Clerk Allison.
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Brindle?
Aye.
Fisher?
Aye.
Member Staunton?
Aye.
Mayor Hovland?
Aye. Resolution 2020-88 is approved. The preliminary levy is set. The final levy will be set December 1st, if I recall the calendar correctly.
Right.
2020. So between now and then, we can continue to evaluate this somewhat fluid matter. Manager Neal and Director Urim, you and your staff did a terrific job laying all these options out and creating clarity for us that was extraordinarily beneficial, I think, for our community members as well, to understand everything that was a possibility here that we dealt with tonight. So our thanks to you for the good work that you do.
Thank you.
We've got one matter of substance left to deal with this evening in our agenda, and that is sketch plan review for 7001 and 7025 France Avenue, is we know as the U.S. Bank site, 4+ acre site there. And Director Teague, you're going to make a staff presentation, and then we've got Orion Development and ESG Architects here with us this evening. They're going to make an applicant presentation. Did you talk to them, Director Teague, about the amount of time involved for their presentation?
I did, Mayor, members of council. Given the size of this project, this would probably be a 20-minute presentation, kind of on the max end. I'll just do a brief introduction and then turn it over to the applicant.
All right, thank you. Director Teague, go ahead.
So the proposal here is to tear down the existing, it's about a 66,000 square foot office building on the site. They would build a new U.S. Bank site, or a new U.S. Bank building, a 10-story office and retail building, 23-story, 254-unit apartment, and a 7-story, 100-unit apartment. The applicant is proposing or pledging to include the affordable housing units within the project to meet the city's affordable housing policy. With this request, what they need is a rezoning to PUD. So this is a case where the city has complete discretion whether to say yes or no on it. They need to request flexibility in required setbacks, building height, and floor area ratio, the amount of square footage proposed here. So somewhat substantial. The main issues I think that if the council could focus on in your discussion would be the height, 23 stories again proposed here. The zoning for this site is 8 stories. They're proposing a 40-foot setback along France. As the council recalls, we just amended the ordinance to require a 50-foot setback. The applicants will get into the details of that as part of their presentation. And then also in terms of the green space and the appropriateness of the pedestrian connections. So with that, Ted Carlson is here. He's going to give an introduction, and then Neil Reardon will go through the details of the project.
All right. Thank you, Director Teague. Mr. Carlson, welcome. And Mr. Reardon, welcome as well.
Thank you, Director Teague, and good evening, council members. My name is Ted Carlson. I'm with Orion Investments. And on behalf of our project team tonight, we're excited to bring the sketch plan vision to you for review and comment. Before I turn it over to Neil Reardon at ESG, who will take a more formal presentation, I want to introduce our project team and just talk a little bit about this project from a higher level. So with that, tonight we've got Aaron Roseth, Gretchen, Trace, and Nate with ESG. We've got U.S. Bank branch team with Rich and Leah. We've got the Cushman team of Bill and John. And we've got the Mortensen team with Nate Podratz and Brent Webb. So we've got a lot of people here tonight who are listening and paying attention so we can digest this feedback and hopefully make changes to this project to develop it further. I'm excited about a partnership with Mortensen. The roots of Mortensen are traced back to Edina, and they've done a great job of becoming a gold standard throughout the Twin Cities for high quality development construction projects. So on behalf of the Mortensen team, we're excited to be here in front of you tonight. Our plan is really to try to align this iconic site with the small area plan that's been ratified and adopted and took a lot of citizen input and overview to come to life. So we paid attention to the grid system. We're paying attention to pedestrian movement. We've screened almost all of the parking. And we've got some unique building designs and inspiration that will follow if we take this plan to the next step. As Carrie mentioned, we'll look to comply with the affordable housing regulations of the city of Edina. And we've already hosted a neighborhood meeting to try to be proactive and create that transparency that's talked about, where we had 38 different participants. And we took great input from the citizens. We look forward to further collaboration there. We'll likely host another open house as this plan further develops. As you talked quite a bit about during the previous finance discussion, we as the development team are really looking to balance a few different things. We've got a fluid market, and that's a market that's potential apartment renters, it's potential corporate office tenants, potential retail tenants, but we're also balancing the needs of lenders and investors. And put it mildly, the seas are a little bit choppy. But we really believe in the quality of this site. We believe in the quality of Edina. And we're looking forward to some further dialogue and commentary with you tonight. So with that, I'll let Neil step into how we've looked at the Southdale area plan. And we're working to balance some flexibility today to develop a project that we can start this fall and bring the Southdale plan to life. So with that, Neil Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, Ted. My name is Neil Reardon with ESG, representing our design team, and as the whole team, as Ted mentioned. I'm just going to flip to a full screen mode, and hopefully everyone can see that. If I can get a thumbs up. Great, thank you. All right. Excellent. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, you're on the screen. We can see the presentation, and we can hear you. So you're set to go.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor Hogan. So I'm going to do just probably 10 minutes here or so, and leave time for your feedback. That's what we're looking for tonight. In addition, I'll just note that in addition to the community meeting, we also have a website where we're taking community feedback that was put out there at the time when we did the community meeting a few weeks ago, and has since been up since then, and we're going to keep that going as Ted already mentioned. So I'll just note as before I start this presentation that, we're not really showing any architecture at the moment on these images. These are site and massing diagrams. We wanted to put these forward intentionally without the architecture at this time, and just know that that is coming. And we wanted to take feedback on these first pieces before putting that out there. So additionally, I'll just note here that we've become really familiar over the years here at ESG with the Southdale plans. We've done a lot of work here. We know them well, and we are really excited about presenting this project to you here this fall. So the project site, as already noted, here at 70th and France, it's the big super block of US Bank. There you see it from a variety of angles. Here you see it in plan, with some sample images of the adjacent things. Room and Board to the west, the original Pancake House strip mall to the east, and the Galleria is to the north. A few project pictures here just to orientate you. I know you all probably know this pretty well, but it's the drive-through US Bank existing building there. For most of the site is taken up with vehicular access and surface parking. So just a little bit of an overview. We see this as just another project along the long line of creating, an opportunity here in the Southdale area just for iconic development and to continue to be a catalyst for growth in this district of Southdale that is going so well already. Ted's already mentioned our team here, but I'll just note that the Greater Southdale District Plan and the district, specifically the district design experience guidelines, are very important to us. That really has shaped our plan, and we're gonna hopefully get input here at this time, and those will continue to shape our plan. So it's consistent with this, this vision that you have to create this street grid system. So I'll show you how we unfold that into 4 development paths and in 4 potential phases. Of which would be decided at a later date, which is first, second, and third. So, but what we know is first is the US Bank portion. So that would be the southwest portion I'll get into in a moment. But the idea here is that the US Bank remains operational with minimal disruption as we move forward. So it's a simple new transformative design here. It's a 1-story effective building that would be placed at the southwest parcel, the new southwest parcel. But what this does is frees up the rest of the site to create these new smaller blocks with internal streets. It allows us to add higher density in a mixed use environment. But it allows for a newer, better bank as well. And something that's really using the real estate more wisely. Just a few snippets here on the Southdale small area plan. You've seen these before, you know these well, but just to let you know, we're building upon those. We're right smack in the middle of this district, and we believe it's important. So, the vision, as you already know, improving the access, keeping it walkable, human scaled. There's such good assets there already. We want to build on those. And we know that we're going to be architecturally varied just within our site. We know that, there's going to be a mixed use component to our project, just like, and those two things just contribute more widely to the architectural variation and the mixed use nature of where Southdale is headed. A few other items here from your plan: Summer City, Winter City, and then just providing great access here to the good things that are already going on, whether that's the promenade or other items. So we just see this as the next evolution in what the Southdale looks like. You can see the project components here already are this highly active retail. So we want to have some signature retail on this project. We think that probably exists at the corner of 70th and France, and that's really important. But this is a mix of uses. This is residential. This is the bank drive-through. This is office, and this is several different types of residential, including that signature residential. So, but really, most importantly, we want to break down the scale here. This is a big project. We want to do the pedestrian realm really, really well. We want to provide flexible spaces, and we want it to be a really pleasant place, whether you walk here from a single-family residential area from somewhere else in Southdale, or if you get there by vehicle. Moving along to Site A, what we have proposed here, this is the northeast quadrant. We have proposed a 23-story office building with approximately 250 units of housing, and then 360 enclosed residential parking stalls. These would all be enclosed within either the sublevel or the podium of the building. 10,000 square feet of retail. This would exist at the south part of this pad. And then really just a strong street presence with that retail and the entryway into the apartment tower here along 70th. I'll show you on a site plan some of those details in a moment. But this provides a large amenity deck up at the top of the podium, and obviously some excellent views back and forth. Site A, the northwest quadrant. This is the site I mentioned where we'd really try to do some iconic, good, really distinct retail at the corner of 70th and France. The other components of this site would be 150,000 square feet of office space, likely spaced across 5 floors as currently proposed. And then kind of a middle zone of screened structured parking that is on levels, on sort of the mid-tier of it. And that would be 650 stalls. But then really at that base, that 2,400 square feet of commercial, most of that's in one large component you'll see on the level 1 plan in a moment, and then a few smaller spaces there as well. But really, all the entry points to this pad are along this internal east north-south street, and to some extent on this east-west street. Site C, the southeast site. Here we have proposed a very simple but elegant bar building. This is be a 7-story, 100-unit building with some smaller unit sizes. The project here on Site C is a little undefined yet. We're still working on the specifics of it, but we think it's about this density, about this amount of, about this many units. But what we're proposing here is walk-up units and residential lobby, kind of right at street level, really engaging, making that an urban sidewalk, and really enforcing this urban pedestrian grid that is desired in the South Valley region. Site D, the southwest site. So this would really be the phase 1, as I already mentioned. This is the move of the bank to this southwest corner. I'll talk a little bit about the setbacks in a future slide, as was already noted, asking for flexibility there. But the aspects of this design would be prominent and carefully placed exterior signage, a clear, inviting entry. And, the most visible portion of this is really the community room, which is being proposed. And that is this bumped out portion here. I'll get into the specifics of that. But here you can see the building elements. It does have a drive up bank. It does have an entrance on the backside, and it does have some surface parking on the backside as a part of this pad. So some very modest amount of surface parking in general on our plan, and it's specific there. You can see. So here we're highlighting the site plan. You can see where that parking is on the interior of the block on the U.S. Bank portion on Site D, but also highlighting here what we're doing along France Avenue. We have this 50-foot setback along the majority of that area. It does inch into a 40-foot setback here. I'll show that in a detailed slide in the future. But at this point, we are looking for feedback on kind of what that area looks like. We know that France is a busy street, and that we want to make that a pleasant and safe and very and functional space for all users, whether those are people using the buildings here or just people passing by. So we're looking for input and revisions on how to do that best. And then I'll note just that our desire to make these east-west and north-south streets really strong public realm outdoor rooms. That's what's called for, and that's what we're looking to do. So it's really a generous human-scaled area. We are considering a variety of plantings, some rain gardens, how to do on-site stormwater management, those types of things. And really just the active frontages are kind of the takeaway here from the public space, creating that important outdoor room. So I'll just kind of browse through some bird's eye views here. This is from the southwest. From the northeast, you can see the project which is under construction now there on the left-hand side of the slide. That's the Bower. From the southeast here, from bird's eye's perspective. And then kind of from above, this would be relatively a roof plan, site plan view here, where you see, again, site A here, closest to this roundabout, site B, the north-south street, and then sites C here, and the US Bank site, site D on the lower left. A few more renderings kind of showing you the massing of each of the proposed buildings. They're from the west. Looking at it from the south. From the east, again with the Bower on the left. You can start to see the heights and the variations of that. This would be kind of looking down from the north here, down this north-south street. So a connections diagram, as we already noted, we really want to sink in and tie in and provide existing connections through our site. Our site is going to be vastly improved from its surface parking lot and minimal, usage. We're densifying it. We're creating better connections, but there's still future connections to be made, whether those be to the promenade or in other directions. And you can kind of see some of those diagrams here. Additionally, I did want to kind of look at and show you what the super block looks like a little bit. So you see our site here on the kind of upper left-hand portion of this exhibit. So this would be the property directly to the south. This is the Bower, and then this is the strip mall directly to the east between our site and the promenade. Again, even pulling back even further, the larger super block here, which this extends further south all the way down to the Macy's Furniture site there, just to kind of show you a little bit what that super block looks like with our project superimposed in there. And then lastly, I'll just kind of go to a little bit more of a detailed site plan, kind of showing you, the building pads, the site access points. Right now, there's an existing curb cut on 70th here. We are proposing to move that slightly north, and then creating this east-west street here. We would also propose basically a reworking of this east street coming off of the shared access here at the roundabout for both properties, and that really creates this easternmost access road there. And then what we do is we divide site A and site B with this north-south street. Right now it's proposed as a median, as a green median, but we think that's generous public space, and we are looking at ways to make that as good of an outdoor room as it can be. Again, I'll note the kind of signature entry plaza here at the corner, some of which already exists today, and then just our desire to really do this France Boulevard well. Like this, our building here sits right at the 50-foot setback, and there's a 40-foot setback proposed here at US Bank. So the components here at level 1, starting up here, the residential lobby, some parking in the middle zone. Here's 10,000 square feet of retail here. Going down to site C, the amenity lobbies right here at this corner, live work units there in orange. The US Bank site, I've spoken about that. And then really this signature retail pad flanking the west side of that. And then an office lobby and some other entrances and smaller retail spaces along here on this north-south street. Going into a little more detail at US Bank, so you can see the pink line there is the 50-foot setback. What we wanted to illustrate with this exhibit is that we're coming into that setback for this proposed community room, and it's a modest amount there, but our team, the US Bank team, feels strongly that we can give the bank a presence by coming out a little further towards France in that area. And as we know here, it's 330 square feet of area in that setback zone. And here you can see the blue line, the 40-foot setback, and the pink line, the 50-foot setback. And then lastly, just kind of pivoting back to the framework here for Southdale. It's about the connections, it's about the urban design, it's about the strong outdoor rooms, the small block grid format. Those are important things, and those were drivers in this plan so far. And just to note, we are considering future flexibility, most specifically with Site B, the office space, as Ted already noted. That there is volatility there right now. We want to let you know that some of this could evolve, and much of this would be phased, as we've already talked about. So, noting that here for you, and really the future architectural vision here that we'll get in front of you next round. But we very much look forward to your feedback here tonight, and I'll wrap it up there, and hopefully we can answer any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Reardon. Member Brindle, do you want to start out with your questions or comments?
All right. Thank you. And it is exciting to see another idea for this block, which is an important block. So on the west side of 70th, we have two new buildings, one on the northwest corner and one on the southwest corner of 70th Street, that were kind of intended to form a gateway to the Southdale area. So I would be looking for something on that southeast corner, which is your corner, that mirrors what is happening on the two west corners. And so right now there is, you've met it with a little bit of diagonal, so that softens that corner. But I'd like to see something at that southeast. Yes, at that southeast corner that reflects what's across the street. Understanding that you're really not showing architecture here, and I understand that. Yet, when you pull back, I can really see some architecture in how the layers of that office retail building come together, and it's really cool. It's dense, but and that's a good picture of it. It's really cool how it comes together. So to the degree that there can be some transparency to what is there, just looking at what the possibilities are there, I really like the corner. And so, just looking at how that corner itself can reflect the other two corners. But I do want to talk about the bank. The bank, compared with everything else, is like, really? What am I missing here? Why is the bank the afterthought? It just sort of seems like it. And that's really why the 40-foot setback in my mind is necessary, because it's hidden. It's hidden behind what is going to be, if this progresses, it's the rest of the site is quite dramatic. And the bank is, gee, we need a bank here. We got to have a place for US Bank. So let's put it over here. And compared with the balance of the rest of the site, I think something has to happen to the bank. Something has to happen to the bank that makes it prominent. And the way it's trying to be prominent right now is that it wants to stick out by 10 feet into the setback, and it deserves to. I know that the planning commissioners were we're really wanting to stick to that 50-foot setback, but I think we do a disservice to US Bank. If it's done in this manner, we do a disservice to US Bank by putting it there and making it stick within the 50-foot setback. It really does need to stand out. So I'll just leave that with you. Let's see. So human scale. So there's a lot of discussion in the Planning Commission presentation of human scale. And there is really so much density here that human scale is a little bit lost on me. So I realize I'm walking among trees, but I'm also walking along a building that has weight, it has mass, and I'd like to see a little bit more on that first level that says this isn't so big. And even though when I step back and look at the 23-story tower, if we really end up with that many stories, when I stand back, I don't want to feel like I am this teeny tiny little thing looking at this massive development. The tall tower is close. There is a podium. It's set back. I would not turn it 90 degrees. If we did that, I think it would, while I'm not sure that the site is balanced yet, but then I don't really have an architectural eye. I wouldn't turn it because then it disappears alongside the retail office building. I think the tall tower has to sit where it is. I just don't want to make the person walking on the sidewalk feel like they're walking in next to a massive building. When we look at the view from above, the footprint of the buildings is large on the site. You've done a good job of identifying where the green spaces can be, but when I think of a residential property and how much of a residential property a dwelling can fill, if we were looking at something that filled this much, we would say, well, that's way too big. It's way too massive. So when I look at this, it feels very massive to me. Now the north-south street, I really like that. Jerry Strauss made a point of that. He also made a point of the east-west street going through there. Those are both great parts of the Southdale plan that take super blocks and break them apart into more going back to human scale, I guess, more of a human scale sized block. What I wonder is there a reason, and it's probably because of the amount of space US Bank needs, that the north-south boulevard doesn't go all the way to the south property line? And that's, I mean, I'm just being picky there, but this apartment building on the south gets to look at a bank in contrast to looking at a boulevard of trees. So I don't know whether that's solvable. I have no idea. But the green amenities that surround the retail office building and the tall building, as I'm looking at it here, I thought I had a really good point to make, but I guess I'd like to see the smaller apartment building be a little more celebrated. I'm not sure why there's 2 apartment buildings here. And if there are, could the 23-story apartment building be shorter and the 7-story apartment building be taller, so they would balance each other out a little bit? I think that would help me with the with how much the 23-story stands out. In talking about the 23-story building, when we were talking about the Estelle, which, as you well know, would have been where the Bremer Bank and the BMO Harris Bank are, one of the things that I said to the developer, I said, well, you really ought to put this on the other side of France, because if you put it on the other side of France, then you could have some height. You're in a transitional area here, and we just can't have the height here. So, so here we are, looking at roughly the same height that we would have been looking at with that building. But that said, I do think there is some merit to thinking about taking one apartment building and raising it higher and lowering the other to balance that out. Let's see. Okay. So this is like probably impossible, but one of the things that, as I've traveled to different places, that I've enjoyed is some of the developments that are large like this. The street level is open. There are pillars, and you're walking beneath the large building, but you're walking in this area, and it's pillars, it's open, it's transparent. And I'm wondering if maybe the street level could, particularly of the Site A, as you described it, with the tall apartment building, if that could open up maybe even the ground level of the office retail, and kind of open it up from 70th Street, so that as you're looking at that boulevard, that north-south boulevard, you have some openness on the ground levels of the main parts of this development. So those are my thoughts. I like it very much. I like the look and feel. We're getting a lot of questions from people about why so many apartments. But when I go back to the Maxfield report and look at what our potentials are, what the future demand is, understanding that all of that was done before COVID, and how COVID is going to change any of those predictors, I don't know. But they seem to indicate to us that there is demand. There's particularly demand for senior. And so that's where maybe the smaller building has a bent toward 55 and up. I have no idea what you're thinking on that. But let's see. But really, I like what I see. I thank you for bringing it forward. I do want to see a more prominent U.S. bank, and in the location that it is, because it's hidden, I do understand the 40-foot setback. So those are my comments.
Excuse me, Member Brindle. Member Anderson.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you tonight?
Great, thank you.
Well, I hope. If it's okay with you, what I'd like to do is kind of move around to your different sites and maybe just ask questions along the way, maybe a comment or two along the way as well. If I started on Site A, couple of things. Got 254 units, and I'm wondering what the mix on those units is in terms of bedroom mix. 2s and 3s or basically 1s and 2s? What are you thinking of there?
That's a great question. We're evaluating that balance right now. Primarily a bit mix of 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms.
Primarily 1s and 2s?
Yes.
All right. And so the 2s, is that your parking accommodation as well? Kind of based on that?
Our goal...
2 spaces for 2 bedroom, 1 space per bedroom, kind of? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then your average square foot on your 1 bedrooms might be what?
I don't have that yet. I would suspect it would be 850-ish plus or minus square feet.
Okay. All right. The amenity deck that you have in here, it's green. I assume it's going to stay pretty green. Is there any public purpose to the amenity deck there?
We've not anticipated that, no.
You have not. All right. Then I guess deliveries are primarily for that building on 70th.
I believe more of our deliveries would occur on the eastern boundary of the site.
Okay. All right. Moving on to Site B, which is your office tower. You've got 150,000 feet spec'd in there, and your 4 stories of parking is over the retail, I understand. And you also anticipate on that main level shared amenities for office space. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Then you're also discussing, I know, future flexibility, and I'm certain that you do that based on the economic developments that we encounter along the way. What type of flexibility might you consider? If it's not office space, and you got a fair number of apartment units here, a fair amount of retail as well, which might also be under fire. When you talk about flexibility, what are you thinking there?
That's a good question. I think it's flexibility in a couple different things. Number one, what is the type of office space?
You're breaking up just a little bit. I'm sorry. I'm not catching all of it.
I'm sorry. Do you have me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. We talk about different types of office space. Is it corporate office, medical office? Does it maybe have a lab component or some sort of other, biomedical type of use? Then we also talk if we're within a similar design and similar metrics, is it something that could pivot eventually to possibly hospitality or some other type of use?
I see.
So really, that's what flexibility would mean to us.
All right. With one of Mick Johnson's recommendations there was to consider 6 stories of parking so you could spread out a little bit. What do you think about that as opposed to the 4?
We think that we'd be better served by going vertical with more usable space instead of parking space.
Okay. All right. Okay, we'll probably come back to that on your C section, your 7-story workforce housing. The unit mix there, roughly. Have you thought about that at all?
We have. We thought that this is more workforce driven, which may be a combination of more 1 bedrooms and more studios.
Okay, so smaller units. Okay, all right. So you're not anticipating any 2s or 3s, any level of family life really anywhere on the site?
I don't know that I'd classify it that way. I think we're still trying to develop a plan.
Okay.
But generally, our initial thought here, and again, this is part of the flexibility piece, is complying 100% with the affordable housing policy of the city? And then is this site something that we develop or we partner with a specific, more affordable housing developer? Is it a hybrid of something? Can't say with any certainty yet. This is our initial idea.
All right. So are you thinking in terms of, I understand that I think I heard you say in there, and you're just a little fuzzy on it, so I don't think it's my ears, but it could be. So if that's the case, I apologize. But I just want to get an understanding of the workforce housing that you're proposing there. You're thinking in terms of strict compliance with our affordable housing policy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So with roughly 350 units, if you were solving for 20% of the 60% AMI, that'd be roughly 70. If you were thinking in terms of 10% on a 50% AMI, you'd have 35. Do you have any preference? Are you thinking one way or the other?
Very candidly, we've not done any. We don't lean either way yet. We haven't developed the plan far enough to understand what the exact unit mix or layout might look like, and or what the math might look like related to those decisions at this point.
All right. Well, the reason I ask is because then you'd have either 70 or either 65 or 30 units of. If it's still workforce housing, that kind of becomes attainable housing, correct?
Yes.
I mean, if it's workforce housing, you're trying to keep rents, I think, reasonable, although they may not fall into the affordable category.
That's exactly part of our thesis, and we've engaged with Stephanie Hutchinson and had 2 calls with her to talk about different approaches on not only within this site, but within the larger Site A, and possibly also within Edina.
Yeah. You probably know that Patrick McGlynn has a proposal going to Minneapolis using the whole concept of attainable housing, and it's an interesting concept. I think it's harder these days to bring as many affordable housing units as you would like to into play. So that's an interesting play on words. Your overview provides for ample green space, and are you confident with the space that I see on on the elevation that's ample?
I think so, especially as if we develop into a full submission and application, the calculation of current green space versus proposed green space, and satisfying the watershed district requirements. I think we'll have my strong suspicion, Councilmember Anderson, is that we have more green space than is currently present.
Okay, it looks a little skinny to me. However, the architecture is not complete, and you're still in flux a little bit, and so it's not the most important thing today, but it's something to consider in the future. And if you don't have a bunch of kids running around, then it's probably doesn't need to be quite as well defined. So moving on to Site D, I tend to agree with Member Brindle that what could be the belle of the ball has the most diminutive aspect of the project. And the description of the bank is striking in the overview. It doesn't quite match up, and I'm sure that your design work ultimately will make it will create a greater statement than what I'm seeing right now. The only thing I would throw out here is, and I heard this come up often from the planning commissioners in terms of surface parking. I know you're sensitive to it, and it occurs to me that if you're only 24 feet on the 24 feet here on the street, that one of the design guidelines would call for 60 feet on France. And I look at that and think, well, there might be a way for you to solve your parking problem and using the same concept on Site D that you are employing on your office tower. You're throwing 4 levels of parking above your retail there, And you could probably create a lot more elbow room on that site if you considered stacking parking above, at least for employees. I mean, maybe customers aren't as willing to park on a ramp and go downstairs. Maybe they want to drive right in. But I do think that would be something to consider, or if not parking, then additional use of what you would like to see and what the guidelines tend to call for, and can also make that a little more striking, as Member Brindle mentions, of more of a statement there on France. Okay. Let me just kind of ask, okay, maybe this is for Mr. Reardon more. You talk in your overview about best stormwater practices, and I'm wondering what those are exactly. I mean, I've heard a couple of things thrown out there, but I'm certain that you've studied that very carefully.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, we are currently studying that. So best practices here really would be an improvement from the existing conditions of surface runoff. So treating it and improving the quality right on site would be a baseline requirement of what we would need to accomplish. So this question, I think, was asked in the community meeting and perhaps also at with the commissioners. A vast improvement. A majority of the stormwater here would hit building roofs and then be treated and put back into the system in a much superior condition to that of the surface parking lot. What we were looking for here is opportunities to do that even better. Potentially with one idea we had here was through a stormwater median, or in some way in some of the green space we've proposed, whether that's in a median condition there or along a boulevard. In other words, not underneath a building. So we're looking for opportunities to enhance that as we think about how to revise this site plan. But at a minimum, yes, we are considering additional stormwater best practices on top of the baseline requirements of treating and improving the quality of that stormwater.
Good, thank you. And then I think it was also mentioned along the way, storage, underground storage, stormwater storage.
That's correct. There would be a component of that no matter what we do, whether that would be under one of the buildings or multiple buildings, or like I said, within one of the open spaces.
Mm-hmm. Also, do we have any water table issues on the site or around the site?
At this time, I don't believe that we do. We are getting some information, investigating early on in that process right now. So, but we don't anticipate anything major.
So there's no water table issues to deal with if you elected to create more underground parking.
Neil, I'll jump in on that. I do believe, Councilmember Anderson, that the water table here may prohibit 2 levels of underground.
Okay. Which
is based on their knowledge of the other developments in the area. So we have not planned 2 levels of underground.
Yeah, I know that's the case across the street, and especially on the west side over at 66 and 6800. That was made clear, and I guess that's the reason I ask is because that's come through so often, and being clear on that is quite ussive. So I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, Councilmember. I was just going to follow up at the Bower, the project next door that we worked on. That was 1 story down there and was limited to just over 10 feet in depth.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of comment a little bit on what I'm getting, and also kind of referencing back to what some of the planning commissioners picked up on, which I tend to agree with. Virtually all referenced Mick Johnson's review with regard to the 50-foot setback on France, as well as the feeling that there's no true public room or open space other than what's contained in the buildings, on the north-south boulevard. There's good green space. Not certain that I would call that a public room. I get a sense when I look at the site of isolation between the 4 various, they're really 4 separate projects. And I think the ability to draw those together and have a more conversant flow to those would be useful, not only aesthetically, but I think for the people that are there, I think that's useful. Commissioner Berube called it a chunky block to the pedestrian and blocky with not enough green. And that's, I would tend to knock on the door of that without using those words, because I think that you've got a lot of potential to increase that. And access to the promenade, it seems easy to achieve, and that would be useful. I know that you've heard that as well. One thing that I definitely picked up on, a little light bulb went on, Commissioner Agnew's suggestion about incorporating solar panels where possible would be a real selling point, I think. And I know that you are solar ready. I'm not certain, I'm not an engineer, and I'm not certain that the ability to, especially on your tower, on your residential tower, I don't know that we have the ability to really impact that tower with panels in a way that is as useful as it could be. But I do think that incorporating what you can with panels into the building as you build it, rather than to wait to retrofit down the road, it certainly makes some sense. And I think it'd have a big selling point, a point of differentiation for marketing, and I think potential expense control. I mean, even if it were for common areas, that would be useful. Okay, the Chair Nemiroff really asked some, I think, outstanding questions, and he one of the points that he made was he was inquiring about healthy building concepts, and I think that rang a bell with me, especially given the density that you're seeking in your residential tower. I mean, we know that disease transmission, we've been dealing with this for months now, and it begins to be a concern. And I just happened to be doing some reading on ionic air filters. And I know that they are available on a commercial level. So one of the things that he talks about in terms of healthy building practices can include that. There's an outfit in Roseville, it's SVL Inc., I guess, in Roseville. And they've been retrofitting restaurants all over town. The key, and what got me excited about noticing that, was they can clear SARS COVID-2 viruses in 30 minutes out of a restaurant. I found that fascinating. And to the degree that that's possible to incorporate that into a residential unit, again, it goes beyond green, but it is certainly an idea for a healthy building practice that, once again, could be a point of differentiation for you. He also inquired about absorption. Are you still anticipating your delivery date to be 2023?
Yes, and third or fourth quarter of 2023.
Fourth quarter of 2023. Okay, so right now, the sub-market report I have for Edina is for the 4 and 5 star units. I assume that that's what you intend in your tower?
4 and 5 star?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So right now, the vacancy rate on 4 and 5 stars is 11.4%. And that's prior to the delivery date in October 2021 of the Bauer and Southdale 1. So vacancy rates, based on projections that are contained in the sub-market report, which you could obtain or I can give you a copy of, those vacancy rates can exceed 20% sometime in the second quarter of 2021 when those deliveries begin. And I mentioned that to you because you're thinking about coming online with 350 units within 2 years. So there would be some competition there. Just a thought that coincides with Commissioner Nemiroff's thought. So I can't, there's no architecture. We've touched base on that. It's not in the sketch plan, so it's a difficult read, but it appears to be monolithic to me. And there's no real relief on 70th and not a whole lot on France. So when I look at, say, the living experience here, and I look at, say, the north-south street, and I think about outdoor dining or I think about uses of retail, the interactive uses, we've got relatively, based on the sketch plan so far, you have relatively narrow sidewalks, even within the 50-foot setback. So in order to create a more human feel to it, human-sized activities, those sidewalks probably have to be bigger. Right now, if there's going to be biking or foot traffic along there, because it won't be on France, if there's going to be biking or foot traffic along there, it would be very difficult to accommodate that. And I think less so on 70th. And if you look around the rest of the building, it becomes difficult. So then when you begin to look at potential experiences on site, then really they may or may not be directed towards France. If your signature retail may include restaurants or coffee shops, they may not be directed towards France, but probably would be better off being directed internally. There isn't much room for that there. So, but that to me would be the most pleasant dining experience or outdoor living experience would be where your boulevard runs through. So I think that there's some potential for that. Your parking is based on your counts and certainly the trends that we see. And you're a bit under the current standard, but I think that's probably self-sustaining. But that may preclude the site as a destination, because if you can't park it, you probably don't go there, and we're going to have to live with that regardless of trends in transportation or trends in how we get around. I do think that we may be moving more towards electric cars than we might have thought even 2 years ago. But it has to be a fair amount of traffic there. There's no point in going through the drive-through conversation. I'm pretty sure that U.S. Bank thinks that that's an important part of what they do there. So I'm guessing that's a prerequisite for them. It does kind of call for more underground parking, I think, as per Mick Johnson's review. We're hearing a lot already in terms of feedback to the council and in the community about height. And as you know, the current standard is 8 stories. Excuse me. You're looking for one at 10 and one at 23. That's a stretch. The sight lines that Mick Johnson has indicated in his own sketch review indicate that as well. And of course, the density that's measured in terms of floor area ratio is about 4 times the city standard. And I do understand that you're seeking a PUD as well. That's essentially a workaround to that, but you got a lot of coverage there. And I wonder about that. Setback waiver, well, around 2 sides is minimal. You're only looking for 10 feet or so, if I recall that, for a stretch in front of U.S. Bank, and that may or may not be important depending on what you do with the sidewalk. But it really does become bike or pedestrian unfriendly around the other 2 sides, not on 70th, but servicing the other 2 sides around there. That becomes very difficult because you're pressed right there. Your overview, just to finish up here, your overview doesn't suggest any taxpayer support or TIF financing. Are you thinking about that? Is that part of your pro forma?
We're evaluating anything and all different ideas right now.
So you're not really thinking about it, or you're just open to the possibility?
We're open to the possibility.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Anderson. And next, how about Member Staunton?
So I won't repeat a lot of the comments that I've heard. I think there's been some good comments in the Planning Commission as well. I think gave you some good feedback too. I want to think about this a little bit in terms of the design experience guidelines, because I think as I've thought about development in this area over the last 5 years and how we've wrestled with it, one of the things that we now have that we didn't have in the past was this very good guide in terms of the small area plan or the large area plan, depending on how you look at it, as well as the design experience guidelines. And one of the things that I would highlight is, and it's an echo from the sketch plan we had across the street, kitty corner, kind of north at the 66 through 6800 France project, is the importance of the interior streets. So Mick Johnson, talks about these street rooms, and Mr. Reardon, you talked about street rooms, and really that is created by these street typologies. And there's this typology 2, which is along France in the Cornelia transition area, and then you've got street typology 4, which is 70th Street, and then street typology 3, which is the internal new local streets. And what has struck me about, I think you've done a better job than we saw in the last project, but the idea isn't just to create pathways between or divide the buildings between each other with these local streets. It's to create places by these local streets. And I think, Member Anderson talked about in terms of the more pleasant places for a coffee shop or a restaurant might be on one of those streets. And I think what is, as you come back or as you're fleshing this out, it's going to be really important to create that presence there. And that's both on the north-south as well as the east-west street. And so I would encourage you to really think through that. There's some very specific standards in the design experience guidelines about the width of those streets, the kind of step backs as you go up, the kind of experience that you're creating at the street level. Because what we're trying to do here, and part of the way you create this pedestrian experience is to have places people want to be. It's not just a place where cars are going to be. You want to have a new place back there that's along those north and south and east and west streets. So I'd really encourage you to take a hard look at that. I get, with respect to the First Bank or the U.S. Bank building, to me, it's kind of a placeholder. I realize they still want to do drive-through, and it's a fundamental part of what they're trying to accomplish. So I see that as more of a placeholder that might go away in 10 years or 15 years. And I'd just as soon it stay at the 50 feet rather than come closer. But I would also, I like Mick Johnson's idea of spreading some of the parking underneath by using under the street stuff. And I recognize that there's probably cost trade-offs there that you have to consider. But if you're down there already, that may be a useful approach. So I won't echo too many of the other comments, but I think that's the really important part to focus on in addition to the other things that you're hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Staunton. And Member Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Nick and Ted, are your shoulders feeling heavy right now? The thing is here, this is a really interesting sketch plan review because it's unique in that for all of us, this is a big responsibility, and it's not, I'll probably make a few comments about architecture tonight, but this really is not about the architecture yet, as you've mentioned. The critical nature of what we're talking about right now is setting that street grid and setting the precedent for how people are going to move through this space and how human beings are going to be able to interact in this space. And it sets the precedent for this entire super block. So that's where I'm going to be talking quite a bit here about it, and really using this, which I believe sketch plan review really should be about, is this. It's our opportunity to brainstorm and to talk about these things before anyone gets too invested. Now, I will say, on a positive note, I think you've got your streets in pretty much the right places, and that's a great place to start. I want to talk about what the nature of those streets really is. And I think the Planning Commission and Mick Johnson really hit on a lot of it. And it might be best, like if you hit page 29, I think that would be just helpful as we're looking down on this. Because this really illustrates, the green, or what we would consider people places, and the car places in white. So first of all, I'm just going to rattle off some things that I've been making notes on. The 50-foot setback on France Avenue, I just don't see any compelling reason why not to have 50 feet. I get the community room and stuff, but I mean, there are a lot of different ways to do that. I want to talk about that north-south street with the median. I agree. I think most of the Planning Commission and I think my colleagues have pretty much talked about it. The median in the middle, while it's green space and it's not cars, it's just not useful. And I think what we really want to do in that north-south street is create a really useful people place. And we can talk about it in a little bit more detail. I've got some diagrams that I'm going to show later, but maybe even favoring one side over the other with a much wider pedestrian experience. And based on where you're showing uses in these buildings, which I understand could change a lot, there's more people-oriented space on the west, so I tend to have a bigger sidewalk, people-moving presence over there where you might have outdoor dining and that sort of experience. I would say there was some commentary about the east-west street, and frankly, I just don't understand, and I wouldn't make this a precedent, frankly, of having diagonal parking on that street. This is another incredible opportunity to consolidate people places in a way that it's hard to do when you're filling these blocks up. But on the south side of these buildings, where you're already showing a fair amount of retail, so you can imagine restaurant type spaces in some of that retail. Now, I'm not saying don't park on these streets. I want to be very clear. I would absolutely have parallel parking. I would have more parallel parking than you're showing on the north-south street, and I would have parallel parking on the east-west street, but make the streets work so it's really about people moving on those key locations. And you're not letting the parking literally stop that movement or preventing, people from dining or experiencing the spaces there in relationships to the buildings. When we look at the streets, the workforce housing, I just wouldn't, and so I'm relaying a lot of things that I was watching from the Planning Commission and really confirming much of what I heard from them. And Councilmember Brindle talked about extending the north-south street. I absolutely believe that street will extend someday. So we can't put anything in the way that would preclude that from happening. So for sure, I think you got to figure out a way to, whatever the configuration ends up being on the workforce housing block, to at least align it with the building to the north, or just getting it out of the way of a future extension of that street. Now these are going to seem kind of random, but I'm just throwing my notes out here. The office building feels a little foreboding, but I think it's just because there's no articulation, materiality, or anything else. I'm convinced that when you get to, and I also sense that it's you're least certain about that block than all the others, and I get it based on where things are today. So again, I'm not going to worry about the architecture there. I'm convinced that you'll figure out whatever as you move along. I do have a question that, Ted, maybe you can respond to. And that is, how did you arrive at the building heights you arrived at for sketch plan? It's 20, so the tower is 23 stories. Could be 25 or it could be 17 or any other number. What is it about 23?
That's a great question, and thank you. I think it's paying attention to the previous submissions, both on this site and across the street, Arcadia. It's trying to balance an efficient floor plate for residential units with density that we believe is reasonable, and finds that balance of really a bold statement on a site that's creating a super block with some reasonable market efficiencies in line with construction costs. So this is our best attempt at creating efficiencies that align within the small area plan, but also within the feasibility of market realities.
So the other housing building, was that 7 stories?
Yes, and then obviously there's significantly different construction types between the two.
So, right, so you're getting to about your max of a construction type with a 7-story. Once you go above that, I'm assuming you're just trying to make the economics work on the tower. I mean, it seems like there's a split, you go from about 7 and then it usually is a big jump. And I'm just trying to understand what's sort of driving that at this preliminary stage. I'm sorry, I keep looking away from my camera because I see your picture over here. It's very disconcerting. So, but
Neil, can you touch maybe on heights real quick? The stick versus PT.
Certainly. At this time, with the 23-story tower would be a post-tension concrete structure, and there is some efficiency and a sweet spot there. Ultimately, at this time, it's number of units and size of units for the market. To elaborate a little further on what Ted had already mentioned, and then really it's that floor plate efficiency. Getting a sweet spot there on the square footage per floor and number of units at our unit proposed sizes for the market. So that's really what we're studying right now. I would say that it could evolve slightly from what we're presenting here tonight, in either direction potentially. Then to speak to the 7-story, at this time, yes, there is a sweet spot at that height right now, whether that's in wood construction or in more of a metal stud configuration on top of a podium, on top of a 1-story podium. So those are the two things we're considering right now. We're early on, and once we get the site nailed down a little bit more in the next round, we'll have more information on the feasibility of each of these with respect to height and each project's number of residential units.
Okay. Could you go? Thank you for responding to that. Could you go back to page 29, please?
Certainly.
So one of the things is, a lot of comments have been made about the U.S. Bank building being sort of the stepchild in this whole thing, but I kind of get it, right? I mean, it doesn't meet a lot of the sort of design guidelines for the Southdale area, but I sort of understand that it's the catalyst to start all of this. And if U.S. Bank doesn't meet their own needs, why would they have a desire to even be part of being a catalyst? So I think there's a part of this where we need to say, and I think it's okay when you're looking at projects that are going to take years to build out, and this evolution in the Southdale area is going to take decades. We don't have to solve everything in one move. So I think it might have been Councilmember Staunton that had it right. It's like, this is a placeholder, whether it's 1 decade, 2 decades. In the scheme of things, that's still a placeholder as long as it doesn't get in the way of the further evolution. When you read about the description of the bank, it sounds like this very innovative way, transformational way to do banking. And if you just look at the change in square footage from 66,000 down to 6, that's pretty transformational in banking right there. Now, granted, they probably have a lot of other tenants in that building, but that's a pretty big change. And I don't know what's going on inside that blue box. I'll assume it is transformational. but what I can see in this site is 1980s site design. And so I have a bit of a concern with that. I also understand that that could transform over time. But I mean, literally all the way to that little trash enclosure in the corner. It's like, that's what, and I don't mean to be offensive or anything, but that's, kind of what you would see at Taco Bell from 1985 or something. And I just wonder, when you're doing a development like this, if there isn't a better way to think about things like that. And I get it. It's a sketch plan right now, but just thinking about meeting the needs of US Bank or even I look at the number of lanes in the drive-through, that's astounding. I don't see many banks that have that kind of those number of lanes. And I get it, and I get that we're going to need a drive-through as part of this transformation here, but just thinking about, is it really necessary at that degree? And I'm going to make some comments later that relate to that. That's why I'm asking, like, how flexible or how innovative could you get and still meet the needs of US Bank, which I think we all get. We all know that that's got to happen for the rest of this to happen. So just thinking about that as you look at and think about the nuances of the design. And overall, just innovation is very much a part of the Southdale experience guidelines, the whole Southdale plan. Innovation is a hallmark of that. And so thinking about all things sustainability, the technology you're using in the buildings, the way you're using the site, the way the stormwater happens, all of those are real opportunities here that, make sure those are ways that you can help the community see the value in this. And I will tell you, we're getting a fair amount of emails from people in my neighborhood over to the west where, they're seeing the density, they're seeing the height, and they don't see the other parts of what they kind of liked about the Southdale area planning, which is the people places and the innovation and that sort of thing. And I think it's possible in your scheme here. It's just you haven't really gotten it to that level yet. And that's why I talk about the use of these sidewalk or these pedestrian corridors and setting the stage for this super block. So with that, I'm going to try to share my screen, and I hope it works. If not, it was a valiant attempt. Can you see my PowerPoint here?
We can.
Yes.
Okay. So, let's see if I can, for some reason. Now it's just not forward. There we go. So Councilmember Staunton talked about the design experience guidelines, and I know you've read through these documents, but I just want to articulate a few things, and it's really about the aspirations for this district, and focusing on the human activity, and hopefully everyone goes and reads these again because they're really the foundational aspect of all of this. But that human activity, the vibrant pedestrian-focused streets, the beautiful parks and public spaces, that's how, that's what the density should help give us. That's why we would increase the density here so we can get what we don't have now. What we have now is just massive sea of parking lot in the Southdale area. So this height and this density has to convert into these people places. Otherwise, it's just people are fearing it's just more traffic with the same kind of results. And again, under the aspiration number 6, spaces for visible human activity on every block. This framework of streets and blocks, pedestrian activity. Number 8 is important. It's build or plan for a street network, encouraging that movement. And this is really the point of all this. It's not to just read through guidelines with you, but to think about again, back to the responsibility we all have on this starting out point on this super block. Spaces for people first, and then ultimately we get to the structures. So really framing your thinking around the people, places, then the buildings. Number 11, and I'll just say, so last night I called Michael Schroeder and talked through, he's the former co-chair of the Southdale Area Planning Group, and I just talked through this with him, actually it was 2 nights ago, and he referred to this aspiration number 11 in terms of this, how we have to accommodate the adjacent property owners or those properties, even though we don't control any of it today, but considering it in the development of the parcel we do have control over today. And I just want to start by pointing out, and I got to ask, can you see my cursor on the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can.
I have 2 monitors. I don't know which one to be doing the cursor on. So what's really fascinating when you look at this super block, and Neil, thank you. I emailed, I didn't have Neil's email address, but I emailed my contact at ESG. So Neil sent me well, actually, they're in your presentation tonight, those aerial photos with your building superimposed, because it's so important to think of this as a larger context rather than just the development project. But it's interesting to note that of the 4 distinct property ownership pieces on this, what I'll call this super block, you can't actually get from one to another, right? So all of the feedback and the what people talk about is this traffic on France Avenue is because if you went to the bank here and you had to drive here going through this intersection on France, you go to the bank and now you want to go to the Caribou over here, you literally have to go out to that intersection again on France Avenue to this intersection to get back to the Caribou. And then when you remember you needed to go to this mall, guess where you're going again, right? Same intersection. So when people think of that traffic pattern, that's what they're thinking of. So when they see a 23-story tower and a 7-story building and an office building, they're multiplying those trips on those intersections and reacting. And so it's so important that when we talk about whatever is being proposed here, that it's really talking about that network and how it changes and how we move into that change, and that allows us to build these buildings. Otherwise, I think we're gonna have some really tough public hearings when we get to if you come back with a formal application and all of that. We really have to understand that. It has to be the core of our conversations about whatever we build here. So this is the diagram of this super block with the proposed buildings and streets, and then the Bower. And when we approved the Bower, in my mind, it was going, the street network, there was going to be some coming off of this roundabout, there was going to be a north-south street. Not sure where that was going to go because we didn't have any other developments on the table, right? I knew there was a mall, or there's a shopping mall in the way here. It wasn't going to go straight, but maybe it was going to connect with something. So part of why I want to go through this next little piece is this sort of, as you're thinking about the design here and thinking about these streets, thinking about them as they project out and create this new paradigm, and thinking about what is your backs of buildings and what really can't be seen as backs of buildings. Because you might look at this, whatever you're doing on the south side of your workforce housing might feel like a back of a building today, but I don't think it will be long term. And so all of these things, try to think about it with that lens in mind. So this is actually from Michael Schroeder. He did what he called a ghost plan. And just to put this in context, the property boundary lines you can see them on this site. So these 4 blocks are your 4 blocks. He was just diagramming them. But I found it fascinating because he was thinking very similar to what a lot of us in the Planning Commission were talking about. He calls them really wide sidewalks here, right? Same thing, right? So on your north-south street, really focus on that really wide sidewalk. Same with the east-west. think about the extension of the north-south street someday. Now, I'm not, you got to be careful, right? We're not implying that this property owner here should take down their mall and start redeveloping today. Someday, though, that could be an eventuality, and you want to know what might happen with this street grid. And you think about coming up from the Bower. I'm sorry, I'm keep pointing at the wrong monitor. You're coming up from the Bower here. Maybe there is a potential someday where you have a one-way system where the traffic comes around a commons. So you're starting to think about future green space. But you start that by creating these corridors of green that ultimately get to the promenade. That's what we've all been talking about. We can't guarantee how that's all going to go, but we have to have a compelling reason and an organization, and it can't be diagonal parking, a quasi parking lot. It has to be a strong street with pedestrian movement that leads to the future where you're connecting to the promenade. And so Michael's got a lot of great ideas in here. He's not trying to design anything. He's just trying to show what that network could be or could do. But I'll make sure staff has this, and if you want to kind of look at it, just again, not trying to do a design, but just trying to show what that network can do. I always like to look at things at a really big context. And so in this case, it's really the 3 super blocks. And again, this is what's so unique. We just talked about the Avenue on France, 22 acres of really pretty much single ownership. And here, we don't have single ownership, but yet you have to transform these blocks of the Southdale area. Much trickier. But if you think about the way intersections work today, all of the traffic's moving down 70th or Hazleton, and it's working at 3 controlled intersections. So again, like I explained before, how the traffic's moving today compared to these simple ideas of how it could move in the future. What I was curious about is, do the street locations that you picked for your development actually work in the future? And I think they do. So that's the great news. I think you picked the right locations. Now it's just a matter of setting the stage for the kind of streets those are and the kind of feeling that you get with them. But more importantly, and we're hearing it from people that are responding by email, is they want to know how the green space fits into this. And I think there are ways for you to show that and illustrate it without, building a massive park or anything. But I will note that maybe someday in the future, there is a possibility on your site for something that's resembling more of a active green space than maybe is today, right? So just thinking about as the U.S. Bank building maybe transforms or goes through changes in the future, maybe that drive-through and parking isn't part of the future, and there are those other opportunities. And then just the last thing is, I went out this morning and just took a couple pictures, and so this is backup one. So the building down here, I don't remember the names of them or anything. It was a weird time for me. I was not on the planning commission or the council when these were done, so I don't know much about them, but I know this will be a pretty major corridor in the future. And I don't know if whenever that was designed that, every building has a back. I mean, you have to have the service requirements. But if you look at the backside of this, so the first picture is looking south. The other one is standing here looking north past the construction of the Bower. And when you think about what may appear to be the backs of your buildings, make sure, because we know some of these are going to have utilitarian uses. Make sure you have enough space to do the kind of landscaping and treatments that will make that feel okay, or even the building treatments as you're thinking about the design. When you're no longer facing the back end of a mall, you're facing a real street or a real corridor. So anyway, sorry if I kind of drug on a little bit there, but I just wanted to stop sharing. I just wanted to kind of share sort of my thinking from that bigger picture. I think there's a lot of positive things about what you're starting here, but as you advance this idea. Focus on those streets. They are the key to this whole thing. They're the things that aren't going to change. The buildings, 3 years from now, the market for office might change and the building's going to adapt. But once that infrastructure is set, now you've set the stage for this whole maybe 3 super blocks. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Fisher, and the rest of my colleagues as well for some really good comments. For me, I was quite impressed with Mick Johnson's letter, having seen several of them, maybe even many of them over the past few years. When he says you're off to a good start on sketch plan review, I think you should take that as an enormous compliment, because you got almost a dozen positive comments out of him right off the bat, which was really quite.
That is a record.
Yeah, it's like you should. It's like an epiphany. People can get stuff right. But I was also, taken by what he said at the very end. You got to get these experience expectations right, because if you don't do it right, these current conditions will prevail, leaving the opportunities vacant and the district left behind. I thought those were ominous words and foreshadowed what might happen here in the future if we don't get this right. And we don't want to leave those opportunities behind here. And I think he's telling you you're off to a great start, but let's keep it going, because there's more things that he wants to talk about. One of which was, and Ted, this may be something you want to address, is he's broken his letter down into sections. And first he talks about below grade parking, and he's wondering whether you can expand below grade parking into the unexcavated portions of the site under the podium of the housing. What are your thoughts on that?
We've looked at everything and obviously paid attention to the most recent submission, which had a significant amount of underground parking that extended beyond the building podiums. And at the same time, I believe was also looking for some significant assistance. We didn't feel like that was a great approach here.
Okay, all right, well, we'll think about that as we move along here. I'm assuming you'll be back. This whole notion that Mike Fisher talked about it too, from the design guidelines, this idea of being organized around human activity. That was one of the things that, without looking at that actual language, I was thinking we're not there yet. That every aspect of this is not organized yet around human activity. I think what might help, Neil, is seeing some street elevations. That's what happened down at 7200, 7250 when we went through that process most recently. This idea, and Member Brindle touched on it right off the bat, is what's the feeling for me as a pedestrian when I walk down the street? They did a good job of that in the Estelle project, of giving you a sense of that first 60 feet being the outdoor room that you're concerned about. And so you might think about how to show us some elevations that reflect that pedestrian experience, both on France and on 70th. I thought the tall building on 70th actually gave me a better feeling as I looked at the renderings for that walking by experience than I did the bank or the building on the corner, which would be the office retail building. I feel like, I know it's just blocked out, but make sure you try to capture that same sort of sense of openness and welcoming nature of what I saw was the use of podium on 70th with the tall structure. Something to think about as well. If you want to go to slide, let's go to slide 28. It's back to the bank again. Everybody wants to talk about the bank. We'll back up a little bit here. 28, I think. Well, that's not the one.
Here we go. Yeah, here we go.
28. Yeah, it's 28. So I agree with my colleagues. Take a look at Think Bank over on Hazelden. Keep that 50-foot setback. Get that community room upstairs with a patio outside of it. That's what they did over at Think Bank, and they had the problem over there, a little bit like here, of having basically 4 front doors on that bank, and that's what you've got to think about too, because they were parallel to the promenade, and then they faced Hazelden, and then we had an interior view where they had their parking towards 71 France, and then of course the south end of that too, situated so you got a view of it coming up to Promenade. So do something different with that bank. That employee parking, I'm tempted to think about that going underground, and I'll tell you why in more detail in a minute. I get the bank situation. I think the bank is still falling short of the mark in terms of its. Well, you'll come up with some good architecture, I think. And I do understand, the bank, Mike Fisher mentioned this, it's gone from 66,000 to 6,000 square feet. I'm told right now that the bank uses about 20% of that space that they have. So with the new era of banking that we're in, they must think they need about 10% of what they have now. I get the need for surface parking for customers. Customers demand that, I think. Especially some of the customers that they have that come for private banking services that are older, they want to park right out in front and walk in. But I'd be inclined to do something different with that employee parking. I get the drive-through pressure. I go over there now and I see 3 stalls, 3 lanes lined up for drive-through teller services because of COVID. And then the 4th lane is for an ATM. Actually, they got 5 lanes over there, I think, 2 for ATMs and 3 or more for passenger vehicles to do their banking. So I get all that. I do feel like the bank is underwhelming. And in fact, I feel like the site just totally overpowers the bank. If you go to slide 17, I think it's a good illustration of that. The bank's just dwarfed on the site. 17. Yeah, the bank's just dwarfed on the site by everything around it. It's kind of pathetic, actually, that the U.S. Bank would have a presence like that. One of the significant things that I'm concerned about is the width of those internal streets. Mike Fisher has touched on it. I think everybody's touched on it. How to figure out how to make those vibrant and joyful and airy and places people want to be and hang out. The locations for the sidewalk cafes where there's not much traffic coming by, and what is coming by is going very, very slowly. I think those are, I just emphasize what all of my colleagues have said about those interior streets. What's the width of that internal north-south street with the median?
Mayor Hovland, I can answer that question. The width from building frontage to building frontage right now is about 74 feet. So give or take 5 feet either direction from there. Yeah, so you know what that is about the same as the promenade. That's an 80-foot right-of-way. And so when you think about the back of original Pancake House over to Target, well, there's 80. We got an 80-foot right-of-way through there. And now you've got a significantly sized building on one side and a 23-story building on the other side. It doesn't work right, I don't think. It's going to feel like you're walking down a canyon. So we got to think about that. And if we're going to try to free up some space for green space, I don't see why we're not thinking about putting the workforce housing into the tall tower and build the tower taller and free up some green space. And I don't know about the economics of it, but our first choice, I think, is to mix the affordable in with the market. We've done several projects now where we've had buy-in and we've used the money effectively with builders of strictly affordable housing. But I think this would be a much better looking project and have much more breathing room for people and airiness about it and comfort if there were fewer buildings on the site. And I'd be willing to look carefully at this
height issue and try to merge all of that workforce housing into the other building, because you're talking about roughly what I heard, the same unit types and square footage, roughly. So give that some thought. I like the parallel nature of the tower to 70th. Somebody said earlier, I think maybe Mary Brindle, don't turn it 90 degrees. I agree with that. I wanted you to talk to me a little bit about the phasing. The bank's going to go first. What are you anticipating on the rest of the phasing? Because we just went through this a couple of years ago on the Avenue on France, what was then called the Avenue on France, that super block that Mike Fisher referred to as 22 acres. We had an incredible plan over there that went nowhere. And I don't want to end up with an incredible plan here that goes nowhere either. So what's the phasing idea? Ted?
Yep, thank you, Mayor Hovland. Phasing plan would be, ideally, we would, if we continue to go forward and we're successful in entitlements and financing and everything else that's related to a project of this size, we would start the bank late first quarter, early second quarter of 2021. Look for a third to fourth quarter completion, upon which the rest of the site would start third or fourth quarter of 2021. Anticipated completion sometime in 2023.
Okay, all right. Thank you, that helps. The other, at first blush, this 4-quadrant concept seems good, but the more I look at it, it feels like we've tried to shove 10 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag. And some way we got to get a little bit more elbow room in there, and it's got to be green. It's got to be more walkable, more friendly. It's got to be a more pleasant environment. This outdoor room concept is a great one, but we've got to have active frontages, and we've got to be able to let people move around nicely and feel really good about the environment they're in. And I don't think we're there yet. I think we got a good start. And I would echo what Mick Johnson said to you, Neil, about you're off to a great start. Let's just keep it going. You've got some ideas tonight, I hope, that are helpful for both you and for Ted Carlson. And those are all the comments that I have, I think. Let me look here real quick. Yeah, that's it. That's good for me. So I hope that's helpful to all of you. Thank you for coming forward with this project for this very important commercial corner. It's got some really terrific elements to it. And I think one of the things we're going to have to think hard about is when we looked at Estelle, I can remember the conversation distinctly that, gee, if the height were only between France and York in the heart of the Southdale district, well, here we are. We're going to have to address this issue and figure out how to deal with it, because it is more height than what's provided for. All right, that's it. Anybody else? Any further comments from council members?
Mayor, I just wanted to again thank the team for putting a lot of work in for a sketch plan and starting the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good way to put it. All right. Thanks to Ted Carlson. Thanks, Neil Reardon. Really good work so far. Here, let's keep it going.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. That is it for the main part of the agenda. We're going to go on to correspondence and petitions. Manager Neal, is there anything that we need to be concerned about that may have come in while we've been in the meeting this evening?
There is not.
Okay. And then aviation noise update. Member Brindle?
Thank you. So the next Noise Oversight Committee meeting is tomorrow. So I will be attending that via telephone conference. And I don't think there's don't think there's any big deal, anything new or anything special about that meeting. It's just a regular meeting. So that's all I have.
Okay, good. Thank you. Manager Neal, I want to ask you about aviation noise. I think you're counting on Member Brindle to cover that issue. Mayor and council comments, Member Staunton?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Okay. And Member Fisher?
Nothing here, thanks.
Okay. Member Brindle?
Just wishing all our students a good start to the school year. I know students who are 100% virtual, and I know some of the kids who are doing the hybrid program. So it's I'm sure an interesting time for both students and teachers and administrators. So wishing everybody well.
All right, thank you. I have a text here from Member Anderson. His Wi-Fi and laptop crashed.
Uh-oh.
So, okay. I was just looking for a note from earlier in the day, based on the shooting that occurred at Fairview Southdale Hospital's ramp last night. I got a hold of Mary Edwards, the governmental affairs person for the hospital, for the Fairview system. And first I said, "Are you getting what you need from us in Edina?" And she wrote back immediately and said that the general manager of the hospital, the CEO of the hospital, said that our Edina Police Department had been awesome. Those were her words. And then she sent me a prepared statement that she wanted me to read for council members and also for the members of the public that would watch this meeting. M Health Fairview Southdale Hospital is grateful for the support and cooperation of the City of Edina, including its police department, in conducting a thorough investigation of the September 14th attempted robbery in our parking garage. This type of incident is unprecedented at our facility, and we look forward to partnering with you to ensure the safety and security of our patients, visitors, and staff at our facilities and in our community. We are already working alongside Edina Police to ensure we have all the appropriate security measures and protocols in place. Our hospital remains open for patients and visitors, including our emergency department, to continue to seek medical care with us. Particularly during this pandemic, we encourage all Minnesotans to continue to seek the medical care they need promptly. And certainly at Fairview Southdale Hospital, they're ready to receive patients with any type of need. So that was something that they wanted us to share with the residents of our community. One other comment I had from a constituent today was all of the stop sign running that they're witnessing, particularly around Pamela Park. And it made me wonder whether we should have a stop sign obedience communication plan. It seems like people just drive with it, whatever way they feel like it. They don't pay attention like they should to stop signs. I think we had a vehicle down there monitoring, or some kind of equipment down there monitoring in that neighborhood off Kellogg and down near the park. And there were probably in excess of 3 dozen stop sign runnings within a short period of time, maybe within an afternoon. So that's something I want to have a conversation about later on, but I think maybe our traffic safety people could start thinking about some sort of effective communication plan for the general public on stop sign obedience and traffic law obedience. The candidate forum is on Thursday night. I'll be participating in that, as will the 7 candidates for the city council. And then this morning, when I was over at City Hall to sign some documents and do some things for Terry Teague on signing a Mylar, I was there just at an opportune time for a young woman from Edina named Gabby Doyle, who was sworn in as an Edina police officer this morning. She started years ago as I think as a high school intern, and the chief told the story of how Gabby had one point in time he asked her, what do you want to do when you grow up? She says, I'm working here. I'm going to work here at the city for the police department. So she and her parents and her boyfriend were all there this morning, along with me and along with our clerk, Sharon Allison, and the chief who swore her in, and it was really a great little ceremony. Not nearly the crowd that we usually have for the swearing in of a new officer, but it was really a touching moment, and we welcome Gabby Doyle to the Edina Police Department police force. And that's it for me. Manager Neal has some comments tonight. I think one addressing Halloween, and then also some of the concerns was raised by one of our residents about public safety and in Edina and some of the work our police department is doing. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let's talk about Halloween first, and maybe you'll tell me you don't want to talk about it. But I can tell you, of the 5 communities I've worked in, this really is the first one where the city didn't play some kind of active role in determining when Halloween was going to occur, what the hours were, maybe setting out some general terms for it. I tell you that just to say that it's not uncommon for city governments to be involved in sort of setting the parameters of that holiday. We haven't done that here. We don't have a history of it here, but we do have the Halloween holiday coming up this year in the midst of a pandemic. There are a lot of cities that are taking a look at do they want to comment on it? Do they want to control it? Do they want to stop it? Do they want to set up some sort of alternative to it? My question to you tonight is, because we don't have a history of doing that in Edina, are you fine with letting it just play out the way it normally might, or the way it might play out in the current environment? Or do you feel like you want to have a bigger role in deciding how Halloween happens in Edina this year? I have no legal guidance to offer you.
I don't, anyone want to leap into the Halloween candy fray here?
Okay, so what are other cities doing?
They're saying that they're issuing orders to somehow. Some are taking the kind of the hardcore approach of, we are issuing orders that there shall not be kids going door to door, knocking on doors, getting candy from people in their neighborhood. That's one end of the scale. Other end of the scale are that cities are trying to organize some kind of an event where families can give candy to other families. But it's all over the board. And there are lots of cities that are just letting people use their own good judgment about it. That we've seen at least a couple of cities that have produced the city has produced a message that you could download and print off at home, like a little sign that says, "Don't knock on my door. I'm not participating in Halloween this year." So that could be, we could do something like that too. It'd be more polite and cute than that, but that's the general message. So that's what we see other places doing. But again, some of those places have taken an active role in kind of setting Halloween customs year in and year out, and we don't have that history here.
I think we can trust people's judgment on this issue.
I agree.
Okay. I'm not going to talk you out of that. I mean, that's what we've done here for a long time, and we're happy to do that, but we'll answer questions about that too.
Yeah.
I do think the suggestion for people who are wondering what to do might include what you described, Scott, and that's a sign that says we are not participating in Halloween this year. If people are wondering what to do and how to do it, And so if that's what people need, then I think it's simple.
Okay.
I do think that it's going to be real hard to hand somebody candy and remain 6 feet apart. So, another thing people could do is just put out a bowl of candy and not have the interaction. Not quite as fun. But, again, I think people will have to just look at their situation and make the best decision.
Yeah, and they'll have one happy trick-or-treater in a...
One. Just one. The first one.
Oh, no.
Super happy.
Okay, so Jennifer and I will do some thinking on this, and we'll come up with some communications we can share with residents.
Okay.
Advisory communications.
Yep.
The other item I have for you tonight is just to respond to some concerns that we've heard. I think I've seen some of the emails that have come to you. We heard some concerns tonight about a couple of high-profile acts of criminal violence that have occurred here in Edina in the past few days. We're not accustomed to carjackings and armed robberies in this town, so I think residents are angry. I think they're right to be angry. I'm angry about it too. But as long as we're going to be angry about it, I really think we ought to try to be angry at the right people. The people we ought to be directing our anger at are the opportunistic criminal actors that are perpetrating these acts. I've read some of these messages and heard the comments over the last couple of days that's trying to attribute these crimes or this uptick to city council members or even the police. These comments I think are terribly misplaced. Spending and staffing levels have increased over the past couple of years, have been supported by this council and by previous councils. In the last 5 years, we've increased spending in programming and service levels in our police department by 30% in the last 5 years. We've increased our staffing levels by 4 sworn officers and by 1 support staff member. So we're continuing to put investment not only in improving the quality of the people that we have in our police department, but adding more quality people to our police department. And the council has been supportive of that every step of the way. And as for our police, they are doing the best they can while treading pretty carefully in a general environment out there that's watching every step they take. Their performance is really impressive and admirable given the pressure they're under every minute they're on the job. I think from our perspective as staff, as staff leadership and police leadership, we're going to look at this. We're going to look at what's happening. We're going to analyze it. And we're going to be rational and deliberate about what we're going to do to take it on. But we will take it on. In Edina, when someone calls for help on 911, they will get a return. They will get an action. They'll get a service from the city when that happens. So we're going to be working on this, and we're going to solve it, and we're going to turn this around for our community. Thank you.
Well, they've always gotten a response. I mean, I don't want anybody to infer that they haven't gotten a response in the past. They've gotten a rapid response. I think our average response time for our PD is 4 to 6 minutes on a call, and maybe 6 to 8 minutes for the emergency medical folks to follow after them. But so we've always been extraordinarily responsive and always had the safest communities in the metro. But as you point out, some of this brazen behavior by some of these people that have been emboldened by, I guess I don't know what they perceive out there, but we're going to make sure, and I think our police are committed to making sure that people feel good in our community. Everybody feels good. Everybody's still welcome. But we're not going to go in violence in our community.
That's right. Anyway, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Sure. Motion.
Hey,
here, Ron. Welcome back.
I had to reboot the whole system. But I have been watching on TV. Nice work. And I guess the only thing I'd piggyback on here, and I heard a lot of it, but I think it's really important that the whole community knows that every single person that sits on this council or is associated with staff, and especially the police department, has nothing but the highest possible standard for protecting our citizens, the residents, and their property. There isn't a lot more to say about it than that, but I think people should feel reassured, as I do when I hear Manager Neal's comments, the mayor's comments, and other comments on this council. So thanks for all that.
Good. Thanks, Member Anderson, and welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Just in time to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we got a motion by Member Anderson, a second by Member Rendell to adjourn. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Brindle?
Aye.
Member Fisher?
Aye.
Member Staunton?
Aye.
Mayor Hovland?
Aye. And Sharon Allison, I had an interesting dialogue today with some other mayors from around the country. In Charlotte, they are doing something called Democracy in the Park, and I forgot to mention it earlier. People are being encouraged to bring their ballots to poll workers, and it might be something. I know you've been working so hard with our team